Hello and welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of Should Have Sent a Poet, a podcast about the stories we tell beyond the stars. Today we're scanning the sky for 1997's Contact. My name is Natalie Bickelhaupt and I'm joined by my co-host Natalie Epstein-Hogue.
Hi, I'm Natalie Epstein-Hogue. Welcome to the Natalie and Natalie podcast.
On this show we talk about your favorite first contact and space exploration movies to figure out what they say about humanity and our wider world.
Sorry, making sure that the theme song music goes down. I'm really excited about this podcast. You presented this idea to me about a month or two ago now, is how long we've been preparing for this.
I think so.
You presented this idea for the podcast, and I just thought it's such an interesting opportunity I think alien contact media is like a really telling genre of science fiction because it's just kind of like all about our anxieties as a society and our fear of the unknown, and a lot of it ends up being about like colonial and imperial impulses, and I think all of that is present in this piece, in Contact, and so I think it's like a really fantastic first movie for us to be talking about, not just because it's the namesake of the podcast, also we'll get to that, but no, I'm really excited for us to get into the critical analysis and the like understanding more from like a socio-political standpoint and from a historical standpoint, like where these movies come about, what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that science fiction in general tells us a lot about the world that we currently live in and the way that we feel about our place in society, and especially the place that we exist in Earth. And I think Alien Contact, like you said, is inevitably it becomes about colonialism, and especially when we're looking at stories that are told from like the white Western perspective, it becomes about inevitably a lot of the time it becomes anxieties about the colonizer becoming the colonized, which is it's really fruitful to examine that and sort of try and understand the anxieties that these movies bring forth, while also exploring the really like great parts of them, all of the really exciting implications and just sort of the love that a lot of these movies inevitably bring to the forefront, that I feel, at least the good ones, are usually about the joy and love that comes from our place in the universe.
Yeah, and I feel like Contact is a really good example of that. Yeah. Also, before we segue into the talking about the movie, I want to address real quick that if you're listening to this podcast and you have not watched Contact or read the novel, the novel isn't really required reading for this podcast, but I would say the film definitely is. You will be spoiled if you haven't seen it already. So go consume that piece of media and come back and
go consume and then come back and consume some more.
Yeah.
Or just go in blind and then send us an email, submissions at poets_pod.com.
Yeah, send us hate mail.
Send us hate mail about why you didn't understand what we were talking about because you didn't watch the movie before you listened.
Yeah, we'll talk about it on the podcast and clown on you.
Yeah. Get in the comments, everybody. Get in the comments now. Speaking of the comments, if this is a podcast that you think you're going to enjoy for a long time, you can check the show notes for our social media, YouTube, and then that email that I just gave, so that you can participate in our Q&A episodes.
Will also be any so a segment of this podcast that I'm taking on, because I'm so interested in sort of the real world reflections of alien media. I really want to get into talking about some historical events, talking about some folkloric events, and when I talk about folklore when it comes to aliens, I'm talking about shit like Roswell. I think it's really, really interesting to talk about both narratives around aliens that are presented as fiction, and also tying that into narratives around aliens that are presented as fact or presented as like a real world story. I think as we get into the historical segments, we'll find out that there's not a lot of facts to be had, actually.
Yeah.
But anyways, we'll get into that later. I just wanted to that's a part of this podcast I'm really excited about is my tinfoil corner.
Yes, I'm so excited for that part because I think before we recorded, I said you're putting the science in the science fiction, which is something that I love science. I think it's really cool. My grasp and understanding of it is far less than yours, and so I'm excited to be a bit of a student alongside our listeners when you tell us about the really exciting stuff, and also like you mentioned, like the history behind the folklore behind everything, which I think is really informative for all of the pieces that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
But moving forward, a little bit about the movie Contact. It was directed by Robert Zemeckis and written by James V. Hart and Michael Goldenberg. It is the namesake of our podcast. It stars Jodie Foster as a radio astronomer named Ellie Arroway.
I love Jodie Foster.
I love Jodie Foster so much. She's so fucking awesome in this movie. But her search for extraterrestrial intelligence discovers a message from the star Vega, and the movie is sort of about the fallout implications and journey to the star of Vega. And it's all very, very interesting, based in some really fun science, because it is based on astronomer Carl Sagan's 1985 science fiction novel of the same name, and it was made in close collaboration with him up until his death during production, which was very sad to read about, but I'm glad that he got his hands on this movie as much as he could before he passed.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing with this film, before we dive into it, I think it's really interesting in the ways that it's like a true science drama. Mm-hmm. Like it is in many ways it is a drama about the politics that are inherent in something like astronomy. Yeah, a field of pure science that we'll get into it. There's a lot of interesting politics to be had in this film.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I don't know if you know this, but I wanted to give like a little bit of behind the scenes information that I found really interesting. Apparently this movie was in like severe development hell for almost 2 decades.
Oh, wow.
So Sagan had the idea for the movie. So like originally it was going to be a movie in 1979. And it went through like 6 years of development hell where it like bounced around, and then eventually it was like, fuck it, I'm just going to release the novel. And so he released it in 85. But then, he still wanted to do the movie. People were still interested in doing the movie, and it continued to bounce around for another 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Like changing directors, writers, there's like so many different like treatments and scripts until eventually Zemeckis was given the keys, and we got the movie that we have today.
That feels very meta-aware for a film that is largely about funding the largest scientific project in history.
Yeah. I think that's a fun through line. I think. Yeah. The connection there is interesting.
And I have a note about this that I was going to get to when we talked about it in the plot, but I think it's interesting to give as a primer on this film. Contemporaneous to the development of the film Contact, less so like a little bit the novel Contact, but especially the film, was the superconducting super collider, which was a particle physics project they were building in Texas. It was first proposed in 1984, and then they broke ground on it in 1991, spent, I think, close to $1 trillion on the project. This is Natalie in the edit. The superconducting super collider at the time of its cancellation had cost the federal government $12 billion. I had my numbers confused with the 2026 military budget of $895 billion, which is closer to $1 trillion. And then it got canned in 1993 because it was so over budget and not completed yet. And so the US government just cut its losses. The YouTube creator Bobby Broccoli has like a fantastic 3-hour-long essay series about the superconducting super collider, and I feel like that is an incredibly interesting piece of parallel to have when talking about Contact and the subject matter that it gets into.
Oh, absolutely. That's good to know. I think, and like the other thing, the Arecibo telescope features in this movie.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And by the end of production, wasn't it like decommissioned or like no longer in use?
Oh no, Arecibo was in use up until the when the big hurricane hit in, I want to say it was 2020, Hurricane Maria.
I was reading the Wikipedia page. I think it was 2017, and then
Okay.
the collapse happened in 2020.
Yeah, it was definitely decommissioned for a couple of years before that, but it operated up through the 2010s at least.
Oh, okay. I think I misunderstood, but yeah.
A lot of politics to be had about Arecibo too. We'll get into that.
Yes, and they bring that up directly in this movie.
Yeah.
So I think a good time to let's just jump into it.
Yeah.
The film opens with a shot of us in low Earth orbit, the sun rising just on the horizon, while contemporary pop hits blare, and slowly the camera begins to pull further and further from Earth. As we accelerate, we pass the moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, throughout the solar system to the Oort cloud, interstellar space, the local bubble, the Milky Way, and eventually into deep space. And as we travel further and further, the music begins to meld and flow from mid-90s hits to older and older tracks. Newscasts, TV shows, and movies all come in and out as we travel the cosmos. And as the universe lies before us, the scene resolves into a reflection in the eye of a child. I love this opening.
I love it so much. I love the way in which it's such effective science communication.
Yeah.
It really... And granted, I think maybe you probably need to have some understanding around this principle to like really get it watching the scene, because the scene just shows you this principle. It doesn't tell anything.
Yeah.
But the idea that the film gets into later of light waves and radio waves, which is the same stuff as light. Mm-hmm. Just at a different frequency. Radio waves travel at the speed of light, and so if an object is 27 light years away, it takes 27 years to get there.
Yeah.
And so the further and further you get from Earth, the older the broadcasts you're hearing are. Mm-hmm. And I think this scene illustrates that in such a cool way and in such an artistic way.
Yes, it is. It is so well thought out and so conceptually interesting. And it's just like any shots, like any extended shots of space are going to get me, just because I think space, like most people, I think space is really fucking
space
awesome.
Is the place.
And if you're listening to this podcast, I would be surprised if you disagree.
Yeah.
But I think it is so creative to see, like, especially the music that they picked and the way that it sort of like slowly descends through the decades. I looked up like a list of everything that it features, and I didn't hear it, which is kind of surprising, but apparently R2-D2, like one of the R2-D2 sounds is in there somewhere.
That. I heard, I picked out like Semi-Charmed Kind of Life is in there. Volare is in there. A couple others.
Flock of Seagulls is in there. There's like both of the Kennedy assassinations. Yeah. Double whammy. There's I Have a Dream. And
the FDR a date that will live in infamy speech.
Yes. Lone Ranger. The Twilight Zone theme pops in, which is pretty awesome and I think fitting. And then it ends with a incredibly distorted address from Hitler at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, which is kind of foreshadowing one of the key moments in this movie, which when I was first watching it, I was so caught off guard.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. The other cool thing about this sequence before we move on is just that it was the longest computer-generated sequence in a live-action movie ever at that point, and then I think for like another 7 years.
That's really interesting. There's some groundbreaking CG in this film. I was surprised that this film did its 1997 CG as well as it did. Yes,
it uses the CG so incredibly well, and it's, I think, part of the reason that it is so like well done is definitely because ILM was involved in the production.
Oh, well, there it is.
Yeah, and they knocked it out of the park. There were other studios that I can't remember the names of, but like there was all sorts of like the greats of like CG and sort of just like high-end science fiction production involved in this, and you can really tell.
ILM is not known for letting crap out the door, that's for sure.
Yeah, which is awesome. Moving on, the reflection of a room in the eye of a child. We we enter that scene and we see Ellie Arroway, who is a young girl using her father's ham radio to talk to people across the U.S. She's sort of like calling out, not reaching anybody, but she eventually reaches someone in Pensacola, Florida with the help of her father. It's sort of like dialing in just right. And they, later on that night, they sort of have a conversation about how far they can reach, like how far they can talk to people. They're like, she's like, can we talk to people in New York, California? What about China? And eventually they settle on the furthest that they could reach is, I think, Saturn, if there were people to reach out there. Which it's a sweet moment, and I think it sets up the childlike wonder that a lot of basic science can inspire in a kid.
Yeah.
And I think the way that a supportive parent can really nurture that interest. He's a good dad.
It's a really sweet and tender scene.
Yeah. Everything with her father is so amazing.
Yeah.
It is a really good relationship. But the final question that she asks is, can we talk to mom? Which...
That'll make you cry.
Yeah. Dead mom, Lord drop. But he says, I don't think even the biggest radio could reach that far. Which fucked up movie.
Tears in my eyes.
Yeah, it's a really great like opening set of scenes. She then asks her father if he thinks there's people on other planets, and he says, I don't know, Sparks, but I guess I'd say if it's just us, it seems like an awful waste of space, which sort of becomes the through line for the movie, where it would be sad if it's only us.
Yeah.
There's so much space for everybody for different types of people to live and exist.
They pull a really effective rule of threes with that line.
Yeah.
Dad says it now. Jaws says it at one point, and Ellie says it at the very end of the film.
Yes. And there's a good number of effective rules of three. I think I have issues with this movie, but overall it is like, it's pretty like solidly competent as like a big Hollywood production. And I think all of its interesting ideas make up for any of the like foibles I have with it.
Yeah.
So after that conversation, we jump forward in time to an adult Ellie admiring the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico.
I wanna add that in this line of dialogue, she says, I'm going to need a bigger antenna, and then it immediately cuts to the shot of Arecibo.
Oh, yeah.
So I love that she in her childlike aspiration is like, oh, I'm going to need a bigger antenna, and then it cuts to her having access to the largest antenna anywhere.
Yeah. She's a badass. She is awesome, and I love that she gets what she needs to do her job.
I'm such a big Ellie Arroway fan.
So am I. I saw Jodie Foster, and I was immediately like, oh, I am in love with this woman. She's also kind of gender at different points, you know.
She does like an incredible job of playing like the kind of nerd that Ellie Arroway would be.
Yeah, absolutely. She gets the perfect mix of like, yeah. Another small note about this transition is they do a really good job of like tying the actress who plays young Ellie with Jodie Foster's interpretation, where they both have this like mannerism where they like tuck hair behind their ear, and they do that to link them. And I think that's one of those like little touches, those little bits of polish that make the movie work a lot better and kind of sell it. But she's a radio astronomer now. That love that her father fostered for radio communication really paid off now that she's in Puerto Rico. She's a new arrival. This is like her first day at the telescope, and she gets her first shift listening that very night. And later she's in the office fiddling with the radio, and she's got her headphones on when her new colleague startles her by telling her to go back to a previous signal. And they kind of like get excited, like, ooh, that's something. But it turns out to be a pulsar that was cataloged like a decade ago.
Which, like, still a really cool thing to find. But, yeah, frustrating when you're looking for little green men.
Yes, that is the other reveal that we get in this scene, that she is working on SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which is kind of seen as, like, a crackpot sort of... I don't know, like burnout decision. I don't know how to describe it.
Everyone kind of treats her like she's throwing her life away. looking for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yeah, and I think it plays in really well with the movie is really interested in like the misogyny that women face, just in general, but also in like scientific fields.
Yeah.
And I think pairing her being a woman with her choosing this like very niche kind of like laughing stock field, I think helps to amplify that and sort of like help sell what the movie is going for in that regard.
Yeah. And it really and we'll talk about this in a second when he comes up, but it really helps to set up the scientific as well as the like personal conflict that Ellie and Dr. Drumlin have.
Yeah. Ooh, that motherfucker.
Sorry, that Dr. Arroway and Dr. Drumlin have.
Yes. The colleague that sort of like scares her, he remarks that it's great that she listens because most radio astronomers no longer do. They kind of let the computers scan for anything irregular. And so this is another great moment of like, she's unorthodox. She's quirky. She's quirky science girl who likes to listen to the radio waves herself. And I don't think it's it doesn't seem like it's a distrust of technology at all. It's just kind of like a preference, a thing that she likes to do.
Yeah, I would be, because I did a little bit of research into this. So like part of the reason that a lot of radio astronomers don't listen is that a lot of the thing you're listening to is itself kind of a construction. Because we're talking about, these frequencies are in the gigahertz range. Which is like hundreds of thousands of hertz faster or higher pitched than like you can hear with your ears. Mm-hmm. And so in order to hear anything, you're pitching this signal down like 10, 20 octaves. And so the thing that you're hearing, it is inevitably going to be more of a reflection of the post-processing that you're doing to the signal than the signal itself.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Which is like sad because I really love the romantic notion of being able to listen to the cosmos. But yeah, ultimately listening to the cosmos, you're doing a lot more listening to your post-processing than anything else, unfortunately.
Yeah, which I think they keep it in that she listens just because it is, like you said, it's so romantic.
Yeah,
and it's so.
I would be doing that if I were a radio astronomer.
Yeah, and it's like, I think it's scientifically it's not the most sound, but I think it's still very cool to like. Just the idea of it, like the idea that you're participating in the universe in that way is really fun. And definitely, I think it's worth it. I think it works well for the movie, which is so grounded in science otherwise that I can give it a pass for this like sort of this fun characterization. I think this like sort of dreamy notion.
I feel like this film really the places in which it departs from scientific realism are well earned for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But the colleague introduces himself as Kent Clark, the head of the Arecibo team. Just as he's like introducing himself, the rest of the researchers enter the office. And this is where Clark reveals that Ellie's field of study is SETI. And there's sort of the room kind of deflates as soon as he says that. And everybody's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, the hush falls over the room. Everyone looks like that meme where the guy says something like puts his foot in his mouth and then everyone else is like cringing.
Oh yeah, the one of like the party where everybody is like, ugh.
Yeah. Bro visited his friend.
Yeah, it's a fun moment. It reminds me of how I felt whenever I would in college during writing workshops when I would be like, yeah, I really love genre fiction. And then all of the Iowa workshop type people in my workshops would kind of look at me and be like, that's cool. Yeah, interesting. It resonated. Before we move on.
Also a thing that resonated with me as a woman who's been in science and engineering space.
Yeah. Being a woman. This will resonate. Period. Yeah. But one thing that I want to touch on, I think this is me reading into things too much, I think. But Kent Clark he is a blend of the novel's character, Peter Valerian, who like fills the same space. He's actually, there's a bunch of nuance. He's basically the same character, but the movie version is also based off of real life SETI scientist Kent Cullers. And his name is obviously the play on Clark Kent, Superman.
Is he not also an amalgamation of Kender here from the book?
He's like a little bit, I think. There's a lot of characters in the novel that don't make it to the movie, and they get blended in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
I think to me, I think like Father Joss and Durhir get blended together a lot more.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think Clark is definitely more associated with Valerian in my mind.
Fair enough.
But his name is Clark Kent, play on Superman. In the novel, his name is Peter Valerian, Valerian is also the name of a French science fiction comic book series. And so this is my crackpot theory that like they purposefully did this on some level where it's like both of these characters have like a science fiction influenced name.
I mean, I think the text like supports that. There's a lot of places in which stuff kind of gets subtly named after something.
Yeah, I
have a moment about this later.
Yeah. There's a couple of these, and that one, I think this one's really niche for me to catch the Valerian reference, but I think that was cool. I think we should, the movie from what I understand isn't very good, but we should talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
But moving on, the next day, Ellie is in the village outside the Arecibo facility where she meets Palmer Joss, played by Matthew McConaughey, who is a writer that immediately like snipes Ellie as a researcher. Mm-hmm. In the novel, Joss is I don't want to say he's a much smaller character. He's still really important, but he is like primarily antagonistic. And he kind of shows up for like a series of debates. He's a little mysterious. He's very aloof in a way that the movie version isn't.
I feel like the movie also makes him so much more of a sleaze.
Yeah,
maybe that's just Matthew McConaughey, but
see,
the Palmer Joss made my skin crawl.
Yeah, I don't like one of the lines that he has. I like Matthew McConaughey. I think he's kind of charming. But I think that Joss is he's a bit of a creep. In this like underlying way. But like we mentioned earlier, this character is he takes the place of the novel's like character, this guy named Durhir, who is like Ellie's love interest. And so they sort of like folded them together to sort of be more efficient. And I think the movie is more directly interested in the interplay between faith and science. And so having Joss be like a direct counter to Ellie's like very like agnostic scientific beliefs sort of lets them play into that more.
Yeah.
While they have like a Romeo and Juliet forbidden love type deal going on.
No, I do think the film sets up a really interesting relationship between the two of them where, it's this like playful debate love interest situation that, I think I liked it a little bit more on my second watch. I think my first watch, I was really like, I do not like this guy and I hate seeing him on screen. And I think my second watch, I was a little bit more like, oh, like I see where they've characterized Ellie as part of this love interest in like an interesting way.
Yeah, I think the hard thing is we'll get to the moment, but there's like a moment that sort of like catches you off guard and you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
But they sort of like they strike up a conversation and he asks about what she's studying before he reveals that he's researching how technology affects the third world. And immediately I'm like, that's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
You seem like my kind of guy.
We're also like tacitly referring to Puerto Rico as the third world here.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's a lot of
I mean, the phrase "the third world" already like
loaded,
is so loaded.
Yeah,
I mean, like literally comes out of like Cold War strategy,
right? And it's a very loaded term, but I think what he's trying to say is he's kind of like exploring like the colonial implications of like technology, and like colonized and formerly colonized areas.
And boy, is there a lot to say about the American subjugation of Puerto Rico.
Yes.
And how Arecibo played into that in real life.
Yeah. But that's what he's researching, and he says he wants an interview with David Drumlin, the new head of the National Science Foundation, and Ellie's old thesis advisor. And that he's sort of like, he basically is like, I'm researching this, but I'm also kind of waiting for him to show up so that I can jump him and get an interview.
Yeah.
While they're talking, Joss offers Ellie the toy from his box of Cracker Jacks, which is like a small compass. She takes it for a second, looks at it, and hands it back to him and goes, "You better keep this. It might save your life someday." Which is like...
really just a like, fuck you, dude. I hate this advance.
Yeah, it's partially that, but it's also like... I understand. It comes... The compass obviously comes back later. This is one of the rule of three things.
Yeah.
But, like, that's such, like, a weird line to set it up, because it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's a shitty plastic compass. It's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
It demonstrates Ellie's, like, irreverence, I think, in her sort of, like, she's not very buttoned up like other scientists, and I think it's kind of one of those moments, but it's just like, what the fuck are you talking about, girl? Then Joss asks Ellie out to dinner, and she dodges by saying she's not a very good quote, and then Joss is like, I don't want quotes, just good company. And again, she's like, nope. And then she leaves, but gives him the little like, oh, Drumlin's coming in on Tuesday, to sort of like hook him and keep him around, I guess, so that he can do his book. But we cut to Drumlin's arrival, where he talks to Kent about how they're already trying to like have the budget for the National Science Foundation, and give it to the Pentagon. Again, one of those like really interesting subjects that the movie is just like not going to touch at all, or like not touch in any serious way.
I mean, I would disagree, because I think like at its core, the film and the book are both about science funding in a really big way.
I would say yes. I think they do touch on them. I think what I'm trying to say is that like, I think they don't get into the politics of it as much. I think they explore the implications and what it means for like Ellie and her project specifically. But there's not like a deep dissection of it. I think it's like a plot beat, but it's not like...
Yeah, there's not really any. There's not really any discussion about like the military aspects beyond like a couple of lines here and there.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie in a lot of ways is really like a fantasy film about scientists getting full funding for their projects.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a core piece of it.
But I want to, on this subject, I actually want to bring up a line that that Drumlin says at the party. Right before he and Jaws have their encounter. He gives this one-line manifesto. We shouldn't waste taxpayer money on pie-in-the-sky projects and start spending it on more practical measures. I want to talk about this sentiment because it's one that, like, that sentiment is a huge part of the politics inherent in science funding. That's a line that speaks to me as really being, like, informed by what was going on contemporaneously with the superconducting super collider. I guess at the point the movie came out, it was, like, 4 years past when the funding ended. But that was exactly the debate about the super collider. It was like, we're going to spend $1 trillion on this project that may or may not do anything.
Yeah.
This is still the early 90s where we've not discovered the Higgs boson. This is a very speculative project. And, like, yeah, that's, like, the major debate that was being had is it's like, well, should we be putting this much money towards pure research? I think I personally really fall on the side that most scientists are on, which is, well, pure research is worth it because you never know what practical applications it's going to have.
Yeah.
Like I think a really popular example of this is when we talk about like how much technology was developed in and around the space race. You know, everything from like Velcro to Tang. It is the silly one. No one drinks Tang anymore. But like, you know, the idea that like all of this, there is so much technology that is leaked into our day-to-day life that was developed in and around the space program, and that's just like a really popular example that people give to talk about how like pure science research that doesn't have obvious practical implications often does have like practical implications that come after the fact.
Yeah. I think that's something that's been coming up a lot lately in our time period, just with like the way that like the Trump administration is cutting funding and grants, where there's a lot of news sources like they capture like, oh, this experiment where they're giving drugs to mice or shrimp or like whatever, they're putting them on treadmills. Like, what is this for? They fail to understand that like a lot of science is trial and error, trying things, and then you learn something and then you apply it to a new thing, and you on and on and on and on. And it's about the ramifications like 10 experiments later. But those, like, after those 10 experiments, then you have something really useful, and you can't just jump that step.
And I think it's interesting in connecting it to, like, you know, where these politics were in the 90s versus where they are now. Mm-hmm. You know, I think the conservatives have always been deeply uncurious, and that's, I think that's a really big part of this argument that science should be purely practical is like, at its core, an unwillingness to be curious. But I think especially in 2026, it's like, it is this, like, not even very logical, just, like, whinging reaction to, like, oh, why are we studying the effects of ketamine and ketamine metabolites on salmon? And, you know, like, either they don't care about the fact that, like, you know, ketamine in the wastewater has a lot of effects on salmon, which affects the entire food chain, which therefore affects our agriculture. Mm-hmm. It can all in the like modern day, it can almost be a little hard to tell, like, what if it is just uncurious whinging, what if it is deliberate, like, I don't want to investigate this because there are business interests here. And how much of it is just like a amalgamation of the two. But I think it's really interesting to see where, like, how that narrative has shifted over the last 30 years.
Definitely. I think to your point about, like, is it like genuine whinging from everyday people, or is it because of like corporate interests? I think inevitably it's a mix where it's the same as like most culture war stuff, where there's a class differential where the people in charge who are profiting off of these things, they're doing it cynically because they have something to gain out of it. But then the culture war machine sort of spins up and creates this sentiment in people in different classes, where it becomes a sort of genuine whinging in that combination. It muddies the water. It makes everything so hard to tell whether somebody is being sincere with you and just like needs to have it explained, or if they're sort of like, they're being cynical assholes. They're being kind of monstrous on purpose.
And I think the film does a really good job of, I think it can be really hard to tell whether Drumlin's character is a cynical asshole or not. I think a lot of it he is.
I think I wanted to say this because I think Drumlin is an asshole. This entire movie, we kind of he like throughout it, like his first interaction with Ellie, he's like, "Hi, Ellie, still waiting for ET to call." He's like a total prick, and I think later in the movie, when they're doing like the selection committee for who to send to Vega on this like mission through space, there's a conversation that they have that we'll get to, but he's basically like, you know, I wish the world was like sincere and valued your like your ideals and just like how optimistic you are, but that's not the world we live in. And he's just like a very pessimistic character who's always trying to say the right thing to like keep power and keep going. And this is one of those moments where the party line is, what's like sellable to people as like just like a mass message is we're doing science that is good for you, rather than the harder concept of like the science isn't immediately applicable, but it will be in a decade.
Yeah.
And he's towing that line because he's a politician, not a scientist at this point.
Yeah. And maybe revising my earlier statement, I think he does an excellent job of towing that line.
Yeah.
Of saying the right thing when he needs to, of like, yeah, being a cynical asshole who can almost make you believe that he isn't, and that he's just like reserved. Yeah. I don't know. Drumlin's character really resonated with me because I had a teacher like him in school. I think that's really funny that I had a teacher like him in school because I studied audio technology, not science. But I had a teacher like him in school who just kind of like seemed like he had it out for me, had it out for like the work that I was doing and the ideals that I was bringing to the table. So I don't know. I really resonated with Dr. Arroway and Dr. Drumlin's strained relationship.
Yeah, I think. And it's very compelling. And the other thing about it is that it's sort of in the novel, Drumlin is a character. He's less like acidic overall. Like he's not as much of an asshole, but there's another character, Ellie's like stepfather, who is kind of that asshole.
Yeah.
And the movie, again, in sort of like consolidation to make a decent, like a manageable project. They combine the two, to make this like cynical father figure who's just always like demeaning Ellie, and sort of is like this really big impediment for her, being taken seriously. And it's a very compelling relationship. But in response to his like his line about like, oh, we need to make this applicable to common people, Ellie chimes in and she's like, do you really want to get rid of pure research? And Drumlin looks her in the eye and says, what's wrong with science being practical and profitable? And I want to wring that motherfucker's neck.
Yeah. Shaking my fist.
Yeah, just we just spent a lot of time talking about it, so we can move on. But Joss appears from behind them. He does this all the time in this movie where he just sort of like he floats in from off screen.
Yeah.
And he like snipes with like a little line.
Palmer Joss with the steel chair.
Yeah, literally. And he says, there's nothing wrong with it as long as the motive is the search for the truth. And Drumlin counters by saying that Joss it's like, oh, that's Rich coming from a guy on a crusade against the evils of technology. And then he goes, Father Joss. And then Ellie is like, oh, you're religious? Which it's like it's the seed of, okay, we're going to be doing Christianity versus science in this movie.
Yeah.
That's one of the big things. Or just like religion and faith in general, versus like atheism, agnosticism, and science. Joss says he's not against technology, just men who deify it at the cost of human truth, which is, human truth is a real vague concept.
Yeah.
But they sort of, Drumlin kind of like is like, okay, I don't want to talk to you. He knows who Joss is and is like, this is not a productive place for me to be, and I don't want to get quoted on something that I'm going to regret saying. So he disappears, and then Ellie and Joss slip away, and they have this conversation while Ellie is like pointing out stars in the sky. Very romantic.
Oh, yeah.
I think Ellie Arroway should have been a lesbian. I think that's about most women.
Yeah.
Because then we would get lesbians looking at stars together. And I just think that would have been beautiful, personally. But Joss says that he got a master's in divinity, but dropped out of seminary because he couldn't live with the whole celibacy thing. And this is the line that like immediately poisoned him for you, I know.
Yeah. Disgusting. Gross. I hate it.
It's so, like, I don't know, man. That valid reason to not be a man of the cloth, you know? If that's not something you can handle or something you want to deal with, go for it. Don't say that
as your pickup line.
Yeah, to a woman that you're in the middle of nowhere alone with at night, and be just like big red X, like, get the fuck away from her, you freak.
Extremely incorrect buzzer.
Yeah. And he says, you could call me a man of the cloth, without the cloth, which is another
A man of the skin.
my flayed flesh.
Which saint is that?
Oh shit, I don't remember.
It's one of them.
There's one of them. Inside Out Man. Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, that one also is like, I'm a guy without clothes. You can read it as that. I'm a man without clothes. Wink, wink.
I'm a real naked baby, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, just immediate creep vibes. And Joss asks Ellie when she knew that she wanted to be an astronomer, and she says it was when she was looking at the sunset with her dad, and she pointed up at the sky and asked about a star, and he told her that it's actually the planet Venus, and that it was called Beautiful, but they didn't know that it's made of sulfur and acid rain. I want to shout out Jodie Foster's acting in this scene, because she's like, and man, that's just when I was hooked. Like, she says it so genuinely.
Like, she really hits the, like, tone of someone sharing their autism special interest.
Yes.
I love it so much.
It's perfect. Jodie Foster is such a special actress to me. She's got this really unique voice that I think also, I don't know, it just like, it sells this character so well. And
I think also just there are a few things in this world more joy filled than listening to a woman be excited.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the best things that you can do. It's great for your soul.
Yeah.
And Ellie launches into a little monologue about the possibility of life on other planets, and Joss says that it would be an awful waste of space if there wasn't any. And
there's our 2 of 3.
Yeah, that's our 2 of 3. Ellie just goes, "Amen," and then they kiss. And it's Freud would be proud, I guess. It's a weird moment.
Yeah.
If you think about it for too long, but it's also like, it's kind of the setup of like, this guy's my kind of guy.
Yeah.
We agree on this thing. Then we get a cut to it's raining, they're in bed, and Joss is sort of rambling about his like religious experience where he saw God. We don't get the whole story. We just kind of come in at the very tail end where he's like, and that's when I saw God.
Yeah.
And Ellie immediately, this is another point of her being autistic, because she can't read the room, and she immediately goes, what if your like brain fabricated that because it's an experience you needed to have? And it's like, interesting idea to explore. I don't know if you should say that to a guy that you just slept with.
Definitely not gonna help the mood.
Yeah, no. And it like, I understand that like point of view, and I think it's worth interrogating, like where those religious experiences come from, regardless of whether or not you have like that faith. But just like saying that to another person's face is so crazy.
Yeah, I think it's really funny the ways in which, I wouldn't say that she's like an atheist straw man, but I do feel like she is, her character is of a type of atheist, non-theist, anti-theist, whatever you want to call it. Her religious views are very that of Sagan in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And like, I think it's funny to see those ideas being talked about now in our post Gamergate world, in which like that brand of like atheist ideology, like, you know, did Gamergate.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to hear her sort of tread out those points. I think also the line where she's talking about Sunday school and how like, oh yeah, I got kicked out of Sunday school because I had too many good questions.
So awesome. It's so sick. Yeah, I think that's a good point where it's Sagan is from like an older version of like the agnostic atheist movement.
Yeah.
That it's interesting because if you read the novel Contact, there is like Sagan has this interest in like multiculturalism. There are like strains of like him sort of like exploring the place that the US has in the world and sort of its like imperialist implications. It's nothing revolutionary, but I think Sagan is like firmly a progressive in a lot of ways. There are definitely points where he falters in the book, but he is sort of like committed to that progressive mindset in a way that's like compelling and interesting, and I think refreshing.
Yeah. I think also the conversation just gets a little bit more in the weeds in the book than it does in the film.
Yeah.
Books have a tendency of doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
But like, I think, and I won't linger too hard on this, but like, in the book, we explicitly, Ellie is characterized as just like a Christian who's skeptical.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really important thing to hold in as we go deeper into how this movie handles religion, and it just that subtle shift in how the narrative gets explored.
Yeah. It's an interesting transition from book to movie. And I think the other thing about Ellie being like more, I think in the movie she's probably like more openly like atheistic. I think that is cool and compelling, where she's the main character and kind of the hero of this story in a 1997 science fiction movie where she's kind of given the space to voice those opinions.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
I agree.
But yeah, she sort of asks Joss this loaded question, and then Ellie tells a story about, sorry, I'm reading my notes, the story about her getting banned from Sunday school for asking too many questions. And then we find out that Ellie's mom died when she was young, and that her father died when she was 9. And so her life was kind of characterized by loss. And I think this is an important moment because as we go further in the movie, Ellie is like clearly a very guarded person. Yeah. And I think that's played up a lot more in the novel, but not to keep bringing it up because we're talking about the movie. But she's a traumatized person who always has her guard up. And I think the exchange that they have here, Joss says that's got to be tough being alone. And it's sort of immediately like Ellie kind of like gets up from bed and is like, she doesn't want to talk about this. Yeah. And she sort of like leaves.
He does kind of PTSD trigger her.
Yeah, a little bit. And
I mean, in the next scene, we see the PTSD flashback occur.
Yeah. And she like gets up, starts getting ready for work, and Joss pitches like a picnic or a dinner. But Ellie shoots him down, and he says, like as she's leaving, he says, "How can I reach you?" And he's got this like deep look in his eyes. Matthew McConaughey does a really good job of this in this movie, where he's
really got the puppy dog eyes going.
Yeah, and he delivers these lines throughout the movie where you can just like, you can see his soul in his eyes, and it's really effective.
Spiritually, he's rolling the booger between his fingers.
What?
It's the SNL bit they did about his appearance in a bunch of Lincoln car commercials.
Rolling the booger between his fingers? Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about now.
Everyone go watch the SNL bit about Matthew McConaughey and the Lincoln car ad so that I don't sound insane.
I've never seen it, but now that you said Lincoln car commercials, and I can see him like driving, doing that with his hand. Yeah. He wants to like truly connect with her and like get past this little roadblock, but she's like, just leave your number and I'll call you. And then
foreshadowing, she doesn't call him.
Yeah. She leaves his ass on red. But as Ellie walks to the station, she looks up at the night sky, and we get this really amazing transition where it goes from, it looks like it's supposed to be Puerto Rico's night sky, but it's actually Ellie's home, and we get like, it sort of like lowers down into this shot of her home in the suburbs where she's like out on their little balcony with like a telescope, and there's like a meteor shower. She's like, "Dad, come on, hurry up, it's starting." And then we hear him like fall to the ground like real loud, like impressively loud, honestly, because it's like he's like down on the first floor and she hears him all the way on the second floor.
I mean, the popcorn bowl broke.
That's true. That is true. But she sort of like creeps downstairs and sees that he has had a heart attack. And she's like, "Oh shit, I'm gonna get the meds." And she starts running upstairs, and we get this really great shot That's sort of
incredible shot.
It's like tracking her in slow-mo as she like sprints up the stairs and then down the hallway. And as she reaches the bathroom, the camera like moves, it shifts, and we see that we've been watching her through the mirror for the entirety of the hallway. It's this sort of like mind-bending shot that
it's a really clever way of getting around the 180-degree rule.
Yes. That is an excellent point. It does that so perfectly, and it makes this like one continuous moment of like,
it makes it feel like a flashback sequence too.
Yeah, and it's like this great flashback sequence, and it feels like Ellie is like stuck in molasses in this moment, like unfiltered, uncut, just this one moment that is so pivotal. It's so important to her. And I think the fact that it doesn't cut is it's what makes it so effective. And it's like, this is another one of those things where they use CGI to sort of like they use like blue screens and CGI to sort of like meld these like different shots together to sell it. And I think it's one of those really important, or it's like one of those really great like pieces of like hard filmmaking that sort of like elevates the movie just a little bit. Like it's like a little bit of spectacle, but it's also like you cared enough to put in all of this work, because you could have just like done a couple cuts here. But instead they do all of this work, and it's really awesome. But yeah,
it's a fantastic shot.
It's a fantastic shot. Unfortunately, she is too late and her father dies.
Yeah.
And then we cut to like after the funeral, where a priest tells Ellie that we aren't always meant to know things, why things happen the way they do. Sometimes we just need to accept it as God's will. And Ellie sort of like doesn't engage with that idea, and she just says that she should have kept medicine downstairs, because then she wouldn't have been too late.
I think this is a really interesting exploration of her character as we talk about like movie Ellie versus book Ellie's relationship to religion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that scene with her and the preacher is really important in characterizing that. I think it's a scene that really resonated with me in like having to confront those kinds of thoughts within my own communities. I won't get too into it. I've lost a number of friends in really tragic ways, and I have had to listen to Christian faith leaders say things that just kind of felt more hurtful than anything about it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like that line and sort of Ellie's, reaction and recoiling to that line, I think does a really good job of characterizing her in the rest of the film as someone who's kind of anti-Christian.
Yeah. I think, it's one of those formative moments where
like, of course she feels this way. This is what a faith leader told her about her dead dad.
Yeah.
That's terrible. That's a terrible thing to be told about your dead dad.
Yeah. They're people think that they're being helpful when they say stuff like that, but a lot of the time it's just like, well, fuck you. That's a terrible thing to happen. Like, why would God do that? And I think that, like you said, it's very informative for who she ends up becoming. And I think the other thing is just like, or her being like, I should have kept medicine downstairs. I think that's also informative of her character, where she is closed off, like I mentioned earlier, but she's also like, she's hyper self-sufficient, and she is, I don't know, she's just so committed to being practical, and like, she's so committed to her work. And I think that's just like that's the seed of it, where it's like, you don't let yourself make these mistakes, and you do everything the right way. And I don't know, it just hits really hard.
Yeah.
And then we cut to her on the ham radio, and she's trying to call her dad, sort of as like a callback to when she was talking about reaching her mom. Fucked up.
Yeah.
Hits real hard. But we cut back to Arecibo, where Ellie is talking to Clark, and he just sort of like launches into this ramble, and he's like, we'd make a hell of a team. We could like set up our own like SETI program at the Very Large Array in New Mexico. Like, we could go independent. And Ellie is like, whoa, where did this come from? Like, we're here at Arecibo. Like, why are you going crazy? And then he sort of he's like,
he breaks the news.
He breaks the news. Drumlin pulled the plug. And I love the next shot because we slam cut to Ellie speeding down a road on like in the facility. And it's like an over the shoulder shot of her driving this Jeep, and she's speeding and she's like driving towards Drumlin, and like she like slams on the brakes, stops like 3 feet in front of him. And then the camera moves with her as she climbs out and walks up to Drumlin. And it's just it's a really great like little stunt moment where it's like
incredible intensity.
Yeah, that car actually stopped in front of the actor like that, in a way that's like kind of scary but like so well done. And it's just another one of those great like tracking shots that this movie does. Yeah. Like it does like a lot of. This isn't like a super impressive one take, I would say, but it's very dynamic, and I think that I really like the dynamism of the camera in this movie. I think it's really effective and elevates it.
Yeah.
But she starts chewing him out, and he's being very paternalistic, and he's like, listen, I'm doing a favor by like forcing you out of here. You're doing this pointless thing. You're like wasting your life. And Ellie starts like going into this monologue that she gives a lot in this movie, where she says that it's possibly the most important discovery in the world. And Drumlin gets so angry.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, either there's nothing out there, or it's so far away that you're never going to contact it in your lifetime. So get over it, because either way you're wasting your life. And Ellie's just like, well, it's my life to waste.
Yeah. No, it like he gets really angry in this scene.
Yeah, he like red face, like yelling, and I really love it. I think it's really effective.
I think it feels very of a known quantity. I've been talked to this way.
Yeah, and I think it really sells their like father-daughter relationship that they're kind of going for, and it sells the like paternalism and like misogyny that Ellie is facing.
Yeah.
In this like where he feels like he needs to be her dad, even though she is an adult woman.
Yeah. And I think that's a really like poignant way to talk about like the misogyny a lot of women scientists experience is like, yeah, it's not necessarily like, yes, there is the, like, women shouldn't be in the lab, I'm going to be antagonistic from a bully standpoint, and, like, a lot of people do that, but, yeah, like, a more subtle thing is just, like, I'm going to handle this woman, I'm going to act like I'm her dad, even though I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that she only goes in the directions I want her to.
Yeah. And obviously, she needs a mentor, because she doesn't know what she's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it fucking sucks. But they have that exchange, but like it is what it is. Arecibo is getting its funding cut, and so she's packing up when she finds Joss's phone number and the compass that he tried to give her. And she like goes to the phone, and it looks like she might call him, but instead she calls Clark and is like, "Hey, let's do it. Let's go to the Very Large Array." And as they're finishing packing up and leaving, Ellie and Clark are discussing like going back to the U.S. And Ellie going on like a funding gathering trip where she's going to go talk to a bunch of different people to get money. And we cut to her walking into a Haddon Corporation building. We'll get to Haddon.
I want to add there's a very meta-aware line here where she says, well, Hollywood's been making money off of aliens for years.
Yeah. Which I really love that line. Very wink and a nod.
Yeah.
But we cut to her at like a corporate building where she goes in and she gives this pitch to directors to sort of like sell them on like a SETI project. And they say it seems less like science and more like science fiction. And there's like a pause where the movie is like, this is the most devastating mic drop of all time.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a decent enough line, but the writers were really proud of themselves for that one.
There's a lot of drama there.
Yeah. There are a couple moments in this movie where the writers are like, oh, this one hits, and it's kind of, it comes off as like a little bit more silly than it does like a devastating line. Yeah. We'll get to one at the very end that we're both big fans of. But another fun thing about this scene that I want to touch on is Ellie is wearing the classic like Carl Sagan outfit of the like turtleneck and suit, which is cool. But after they're like, yeah, we're not going to fund this, Ellie gets really pissed and she goes up to them and she starts yelling about like, you know, planes, nuclear energy, missions to Mars, like all of these were seen as crazy, but SETI could be the most important of these. Like this is like, again, she gives her little speech of like, this is the most important thing in the world, potentially. And she starts apologizing because she's like, sorry, I've been going through this a lot lately.
She like moves herself to tears. Like it's a really emotional scene.
It's another great Jodie Foster acting moment.
Yeah.
And while she's apologizing, the lead investor gets a phone call and he's like, okay, yes, okay. And then he kind of gives her like this resigned look and he's like, you're getting your money.
Yeah.
And she like looks up at this corner in the like camera in the corner of the room and she's like, thank you. Like, because whoever is the head of this corporation is bailing her out.
Foreshadowing perhaps my favorite character in the film. We'll get to him later.
Really? He's your favorite?
We'll get to him later.
Fascinating. Okay.
We'll get to him later.
Okay, I'm excited to talk about him then. I wasn't betting on that.
We'll get to him later.
We'll get to him later. We cut 4 years in the future. Ellie is sitting in a field listening to signals at the Very Large Array. She's like punching something into a laptop and then the dish behind her begins to turn. I love the spectacle of this, where they're actually filming on site and they had to do like a bunch of contracts because it's like a working facility. And so they had to like make deals to like let them turn the telescope.
This film is like fantastic for science filming.
Yeah. It's so fucking awesome.
There's so much good infrastructure in this movie.
Yeah. It's one of those great, sometimes movies do this where they have really big set pieces that they film characters doing stuff in front of them. And it's like, it was a lot of work to go there, set this up, and like have this like giant piece of machinery move. And it's a commitment to like filmmaking at its best. And I just adore it. And then we cut back to like the main office at the Very Large Array as Clark is returning from a meeting. I also really like this shot because one of the guys on the SETI team is like, he's fishing in like a kiddie pool. And he's like, oh, look at this fish. And there's one of the researchers with them is also named Fish.
Yeah. It's Fisher and Willie are the two technicians.
Yeah. But like he's fishing in this little kiddie pool as the van with Clark is like pulling up, and they do this shot where he's like reeling the rod in as the van pulls up and parks, and then right as it finishes parking, he stops reeling.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's some good filmmaking.
Yeah.
That's one of those little touches that is just like really dynamic and fun. But Clark announces that Drumlin and the government are kicking the team out, despite them still having funding.
Yeah.
Because Drumlin has it out for Ellie. And apparently Ellie has been like listening to washing machines and watching TV static.
I need you to get into what they call her.
Oh, what is... So she's been doing these things, and then, oh wait, I'm going to guess what it is, because I don't have it written down, but I'm going to guess in a second.
I have it written down.
She's been listening to washing machines and watching TV static.
Woman after my own heart, first of all.
Yeah, relatable. I listen to brown noise to fall asleep and shit, so yeah. But she's basically like, I'm looking for patterns, guys. I'm not crazy.
Woman after my own heart. Also, they call her the High Priestess of the Desert, which you're only making me like her more.
Yeah, that's a good fucking name.
I want to be the fucking High Priestess of the Desert, listening to TV static, trying to find noise in the chaos.
Yeah.
That sounds like a crazy art residency.
Yeah, it reminded me of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is a movie that I haven't seen, but I really want to. And feels like it would be up our alley, even though it's not science fiction.
Yeah.
But yeah, these rumors about her kind of doing these like eccentric things have made the project even more of a laughingstock. And so Drumlin's like, we can't be having this. And so he pulls the plug, even though they have funding for like another 6 years or something like that, something crazy. And Ellie immediately is like, oh, we'll find a way. But Clark is like, you need to be realistic about this. It's over. Like, there's not much else that we can do. We can't go anywhere else. And the government has this ability. They own the facility. We can't stop them. And she's like, fine, I'll do it alone. And she drives out into the Grand Canyon to like brood.
I really love the tension that this scene sets up.
Yeah. I think it does some interesting things for later in the movie. It sets up like a final scene that has some like interesting implications. But it plays into the science funding aspect of the movie, and also like the paternalism, like it happens to Ellie again. That it's a very loaded moment. And I do really like it. I like this as a source of drama. But
all of these men treating Ellie like she's like a petulant teenage girl and not like a doctor.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like to a degree she's not being realistic about like her ability to do this project anymore.
Yeah.
She is so glued to this and like proving everybody wrong. And I think I would also be this way. Like I would also be stubborn about this. But they treat her as, like you said, childish rather than like a person who is really committed and driven. And it's characterized as like a bad thing to them rather than like something that is like really admirable.
Yeah.
But we cut to Joss being interviewed by Larry King, the real Larry King on TV.
Yeah, there's a lot of cameos like that in this film. We'll touch on them as they come up.
Yeah, the long and short of it is they worked with CNN to get like it's like 20-something of their broadcasters in the movie, which is crazy. So it seems like in this future, CNN is the only news source left.
I mean, wrong company, but not an inaccurate
unfortunately. Larry King basically gives us some like background on like what Joss has been up to, and apparently he's now a fixture in Bill Clinton's White House. I think it's Clinton's White House at this point.
Yeah, well, Bill Clinton's in the movie.
Yeah, he's in the movie, which we'll get to as well, but there is like later a line where they talk about how he's been a part of like 2 administrations. And so
my understanding is this scene to the scene where we see them in the White House is like less than a week, is like a couple of days.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. The time is fast and loose in this movie, especially
Very.
as it goes on, which like relativity and all that, I guess it makes sense. But he's also known as God's diplomat, which is a crazy name to drop.
Yeah.
It's pretty badass. Priestess of the desert, God's diplomat. But the SETI crew are watching the interview. King asks Joss if he's anti-science or technology, to which he responds no. He's just asking if science is making humanity happier. He remarks that we use the internet and connect across the world, yet feel lonelier and more cut off than any other time in human history. He says we're looking to find meaning, but can't, so we fill the hole with consumerism. I'm curious, what do you make of his little monologue here?
I thought it was so fascinating because as this monologue is taking place, we're getting cuts back to what we saw at the intro of this film, where where it was giving the exposition about the radio waves. Mm-hmm. We get that shot closing back in on Earth with the contact signal, the eponymous signal of the film, and we get that right as he's kind of coming to the apex of his speech, and he's being like, and I think like it's literally these 2 shots are juxtaposed of, the camera coming really close in on Palmer Joss and him being like, what does it all mean? And then right as he's saying that, Dr. Arroway sitting out in the desert with her I don't know, I actually didn't clock what headphones those are. They just say studio monitor on the headband, which I think is really funny. Also not the headphones you'd be using to listen outside in the desert, but that's beside the point. I think it's really fascinating that as he's coming to the apex of his speech and asking the question of like, what does it all mean? Dr. Arroway at that moment is hearing the signal coming in for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is like that. I didn't really think of that, but I think that is a cool moment where Joss is like, science isn't making us feel any better. It's not like helping us like find our purpose, right? As like the one thing that kind of like very arguably like helps humanity find its purpose is like coming to Earth. And it's representative of the battle between like faith and science in this movie. But also as a speech on its own, Joss is like, oh, we feel so empty. He talks about consumerism a little, but it feels like he's dancing around. It's one of those things where it's like a character isn't willing to admit that like capitalism is kind of the problem, like alienation and like isolation are the real causes here, rather than like necessarily like the internet or scientific advancement.
It exists at this point in the late 90s where I think everyone was like a little bit too afraid to be like, yeah, capitalism is the problem.
Right, because this is right at the peak of the end of history. And sort of like that movement of like the Cold War is over and now everything will stay the same forever.
Everything is going to be liberal democracies forever now.
Yeah. The entrenchment of neoliberalism. Yeah. But out in the desert, Ellie is laying on the hood of her car. I love this shot so much. She's so fucking awesome. So good. She's listening to the telescopes when she starts hearing something special, a steady repeating pulse. And she bolts upright, climbs over her windshield into her car and books it to the office. This is the signal. This is what the movie is about. And I think we'll dig into it after we do a quick ad break. So we'll be right back.
Yeah. Hi, welcome back. Thank you for listening to our ads about, I don't know, like military industrial schemes and things like that.
If you're getting ads for
ads for evil shit on this podcast, I promise it wasn't us.
Please send us an email so that we can figure out how to stop that from happening. Yeah. If you hear anything evil, immediately notify us and we'll obliterate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nuked from orbit.
They should do that to Drumlin in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get there.
We'll get there. So going back to the movie, as we left off, Ellie is driving into back to the headquarters of the Very Large Array in New Mexico. And as she's driving, she starts radioing to the office, and she's like yelling out coordinates and like directions, and is basically like, guys, we got a live one.
It's a really good scene.
It's a really good scene. It's really dynamic. Basically, Ellie is like speeding through the desert while everybody in the office is sort of like getting all of the computers to life. It's very frantic, like very manic energy. And just like, it's really well directed.
In here, I have a couple of things that I want to touch on about this scene. But one thing I want to talk about that we were sort of discussing in the break is the sound design of the contact signal itself.
Yeah.
How... I think it's funny. I like did a whole bunch of research on this because I was really curious, and I found interviews from Randy Tom and a couple of the other people who worked on sound design on the film, and they say almost nothing, or no, they'd say exactly nothing about the contact signal in that interview. And I was able to find nothing on it, and then you just found in like the IMDb trivia that the signal sounds a lot like there's some noises of like there's a very clear like sound of like what a heartbeat sounds like on ultrasound, like that blood rushing sort of thing. And there's also this very like Doctor Who TARDIS-esque tone.
Yeah.
And the thing that you brought up is that according to the IMDb page, it is one of the original Doctor Who TARDIS sounds.
Yes, they chopped it up and they like slowed it down, I think. And so I love that. Once you get it pointed out to you, I think if you listen to it, maybe in post we can add the TARDIS sound.
I'll like add it in here, yeah.
Yeah, and like once you get that pointed out to you, you can definitely hear it. And I think it's one of those cool like through lines of science fiction thing where it's like it's calling back to this very formative piece of science fiction in a way that I really love.
Yeah.
And it sounds great. It's a very, despite being like the TARDIS, it feels very unique. And it feels like partially like it's kind of imposing. It's like it's just a little bit creepy to me, which I find really interesting.
No, it's definitely really unsettling. It's definitely meant. I think it really holds the gravity that it needs to as a sound. I think the inclusion of like sort of like the heartbeat, blood rushing, and some very classic science fiction nods. I think that really helps give it the gravity that it needs. I think the sound design of the contact signal is so great.
Yeah, it's really excellent, and it helps sell the scene, which basically, as the scene goes on, we're cutting back and forth between Ellie driving and the team at the headquarters, setting up all of the computers, like plugging shit in, it's all what I would call like technobabble normally, but it's you were doing research. It's all real scientific terminology.
I want to take a moment to just like go line for line in this scene because it's kind of amazing.
Fuck yeah, let's do it.
The technobabble actually is like grounded in reality. Okay, so breaking it down. First, we've got a partially polarized set of moving pulses, amplitude modulated. This is a line that Fisher says. Partially polarized is talking about the like the polarization or the spin of the particles. If you're aware of like polarized sunglasses, every electron has a spin and a direction that its spin is moving in. When we're talking about like signals, that spin often also looks like oscillation in the signal. But so partially polarized means that it's like sort of between the two different polarization states that we're measuring. I think the book also gets into this in a really interesting way that I think was probably just too heady for the movie. But it talks about how some of the data is being transmitted as polarization modulation, which is literally the signal modulating back and forth between the two polarities. So like probably the way to best explain that would be, you're listening to this podcast in stereo right now. You have your left and your right ear. If there was a signal that started panning back and forth really, really quickly at audio rate between your left and right ear, that's an example of polarization modulation.
Yeah.
And that polarity, in stereo audio, we can think of it as being like the left speaker versus the right speaker. In radio astronomy, we're literally talking about like the spin of electrons. It gets into like quantum measurements really quickly.
Yeah.
But anyways, going line for line with this, a partially polarized set of moving pulses. Those moving pulses in question are the like the sound object, and they're being amplitude modulated, which just means that they're the pulses are changing level of volume. They're changing amplitude. The amplitude is being modulated in what they then realize is like prime numbers. So Willie says, "We're locked. System checks out. Signal across the board. What's the frequency?" It means they've locked the telescope array to be tracking that area of sky because, with a radio telescope, you have to consider the movement of the Earth because as the Earth moves, your local sky moves. And so the telescope has to literally be tracking the celestial motion of the Earth in order to stay locked onto this object. So that's what Willie's saying in that line. Ellie then responds to what's the frequency with 4.4623 gigahertz, hydrogen times pi. Nice. This is a really important line because so a frequency that gets used a lot in radio astronomy, this will be relevant when we talk about the WOW signal here in a few. This frequency called the hydrogen line. It is, I have it written down elsewhere in my notes. The hydrogen line is, I can't find it. It's like 1.4 something gigahertz. And it is literally the resonant frequency of a hydrogen atom. Hydrogen atoms move at that many gigahertz, really, really fast. and they resonate at that gigahertz too. So like an exciting of hydrogen atoms will produce signals at that frequency. And within the context of SETI, it's both a frequency that radio astronomers are already listening at because it allows you to see the position of hydrogen in the universe, one of the most plentiful atoms. But within SETI research, it's also really important because it is a likely signal for someone else to be sending extraterrestrial communications on, because as far as we know, the resonant frequency of a hydrogen atom is the same everywhere in the universe.
Yeah.
And this is a big thing for Sagan, is that Ellie several times in the movie talks about how, the aliens communicated with us in the language of science, and how the language of science is like this important thing. And that's like very much the author speaking through the character pretty directly.
Right.
This was like a huge area of study for Carl Sagan, is, the work he did on the Voyager plaques is very in line with this, where he starts, literally, the Voyager plaques start with, okay, here is our symbol for the period of a hydrogen atom's oscillation, and then literally building up physical principles from there.
Yeah.
So this was a huge area of study for Carl Sagan. And Ellie's sort of postulation of hydrogen times pi, to me, feels like someone wanting to like sort of explore, like, what if my pet theory was right? Of hydrogen times pi. So you've got not only the frequency of hydrogen, which is one like physical fundamental, but you've also got the circle constant, which is a mathematical fundamental that we also kind of can expect. We can expect that the circle constant comes up regardless of your language or your like sensory abilities as a species, because, the ratio of the circumference of a circle to the radius of a circle is you're always going to find pi in just all of the many places that pi exists.
Yeah.
Also, when you're dealing with oscillating frequencies, the sine wave directly relates back to pi in some really important ways. Pi is really important as like a universal constant. The book gets a little bit more into this in a way that we don't have time to talk about.
Yeah.
But, sorry, moving swiftly forward from Ellie talking about hydrogen times pi. And then Fisher responds, "Oh, it's a strong sucker too." Willie says, "I've got it, I'm patched in." Ellie says, let me hear it. And then, we hear the cool noise over the speakers, and it's like this really like impactful moment. And then she says, "Make me a liar, Fish." What she's doing here is, so, scientists, they want to be skeptics, and especially when you're working with like SETI, you really want to address the easy possibilities first.
Yeah.
Extraordinary conclusions need extraordinary data.
Right.
And so when she says this line to Fish, she's doing a very science accurate thing of saying, come up with some easy reasons why this isn't what we're looking at. Why we're not. Come up with some easy reasons as to why this isn't an extraterrestrial signal.
Yeah. Give me some counterpoints.
And Fish goes, it could be AWACS out of Kirkland jamming us. AWACS is a system that is like a radar system the U.S. military uses, both for weather and like aircraft tracking. It's basically they put a big plane up in the sky with a giant radar dish on it, and it's just like, it fires out like broadband radio frequencies, capturing all of this data.
Also, famously, the planes that Iran have been shooting out of the sky, and the U.S. only had like 4, or there are only 4 remaining, and it's kind of like real bad to lose those.
Yeah. So AWACS, a potentially defunct system, depending on when you're listening to this.
Not by choice.
But so they basically just addressing the possibility of like it could be an aircraft that's putting off a lot of radio emissions. Let's make sure it's not that.
Yeah. They
make sure it's not that, and they're correct that it's not AWACS. Ellie says, let's check FUD's reading it too. FUD is an acronym for a follow-up detection device. This is a thing used in SETI. It can be a computer that is directly pulling and analyzing data so that the telescope can be freed up to do other tasks. It can also come in the form of like an external telescope elsewhere that's also picking up the signal. Basically, they want to check their instrumentation to make sure that it's not a fluke. And later in the scene, when she's checked Fudd's reading, she kisses the screen and says, "Thank you, Elmer." This is a reference to both Fudd, as in Elmer Fudd.
Yeah.
That wascally wabbit. But also, I found this out, apparently Elmer is an endearing nickname that you give to your amateur radio instructor. Like, the person who takes you under their wing and shows you the ropes when it comes to ham radio is your Elmer. So it's this really good nerdy term that comes up.
That's so specific.
And then, we see a great shot of her switching on a Tektronix TDS 420 software-enabled analog oscilloscope. I have, sitting here in the room, I have my own Tektronix 425A. Great scope. Love a Tektronix scope. Love an analog oscilloscope. And then after all of this exchange, Fisher says AWACS status is negative, and Ellie says, "What about White Sands?" White Sands is a missile testing range in New Mexico that would also be putting off potential errant radar sources.
Yeah.
So they check that it's not like known military objects. They also have to check. They say, "I'm going to punch up the darks." The darks are like dark spy satellites. So that's anything that NORAD is tracking. So that's like potentially American spy satellites that like the military doesn't want people to know about necessarily.
Right.
Or it's Soviet spy satellites. I guess it's not Soviet spy satellites at the time of this film because the Soviet Union has dissolved. Right. It was Soviet satellites in the book because the Soviet Union hadn't dissolved yet.
Yeah. I do want to talk about that at some point because I think it's an interesting change.
But so they have to rule out dark satellites too. They rule them out. Willie says, "Okay, point source confirmed. Whatever it is, it ain't local." This is an important factor. This was also an important like narrative piece about the WOW signal, in that the Earth has moved enough for them to have analyzed that this signal is coming from somewhere in the background motion of the sky and not in the foreground motion of the sky, which is things like the planets and the moon and the sun itself, and all of these objects that aren't tens, hundreds, millions of light years away.
Yeah.
They need to make sure that it's not something within the solar system, or that it's not something in orbit or in like a geostationary orbit. And so using, they also mention in this scene interferometry, which is a really cool technique that radio telescopes use, where basically you can take multiple telescopes that are like precisely timed to each other, and you can look at the interference between the signals that they're getting and basically create a higher resolution image that is analogous to if you had a telescope dish that was the size of the distance between those two telescopes. So that's why the Very Large Array even works, is that it's an array of telescopes, and those telescopes all are timed properly and function as though the radar dish was the size of the entire array.
Gotcha.
Notably, interferometry was used in contemporary science radio astronomers timed like a global array of telescopes, and they used that to take photos, like visible light photographs of black holes that were hundreds of millions of light years away. Interferometry, very cool technology and very important for understanding like, okay, this object is coming from somewhere off in like the cosmic background motion. It's not something that is local to either our orbit or to the solar system at all.
Right.
And then, they say, Willie says, "It's somewhere in Lyra, I think." And Ellie says Vega, and everyone's incredulous about it being Vega because it's only 26 light years away, which is not very far galactically speaking.
Right.
There's also some incredulity of Ellie's like, "I checked Vega several times, so many times at Arecibo and never got anything."
Right. Yeah.
Which is an interesting piece of conversation that comes up later.
Yeah, definitely. I noted that one as well.
Oh, and then how could I forget? They talk about the Jansky.
Oh,
the
yes.
Jansky,
the Janskys.
Guys, the Jansky is a real unit of measurement that radio astronomers use in real life. It's not an SI unit, unfortunately. But it is the analogous SI unit is watts per square meter per hertz. Mm-hmm. And so it is a measure of a signal's intensity in a given position of sky at a given frequency, which, becomes useful when you're talking about radio astronomy. And then, specifically, the Jansky is not 1 watt per meter square per hertz. It is 10 to the negative 26 watts per inverse meter squared times inverse hertz. So it's... But all that's to say is that the Jansky is a measure of the intensity of a signal against the background radiation.
Yeah.
It's named after Carl Jansky, who was a pioneering American radio scientist.
Shout out Dr. Jansky.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of the Jansky, and I'm a big fan that they found a really cool jargon term. I'm really happy about the fact that this scene entirely uses discipline accurate jargon.
Yeah, and I think that is, you can tell that Sagan was involved in this production.
Yeah,
because he was making sure that they use those, kept it as accurate as possible in the important ways, and it really shows up.
Yeah. Is this a good time for me to talk about the WOW signal?
I think so, but before you do, I just my favorite moment of lingo in that scene is when I think it's Fisher says boss has a bogey.
Yeah.
Really in a really great delivery. That's my layman contribution to this conversation.
I'm a big fan of that as well.
Very very soundboardable a moment.
Like what? NORAD's not tracking any darks in this sector.
Yeah. Full of quotable lines that are unusable for the most part, but just like really satisfying to hear people say. But yeah, I think talking about you just set up the WOW signal perfectly, and so I think that makes sense.
Hi, welcome to my tinfoil segment. This is where we talk about tinfoil. Unfortunately, the WOW signal is like probably kind of underwhelming if we're looking for like crackpot conspiracies. I think as the episodes get in, I'll get into juicier stuff. But so the WOW signal is something that, a historical event that really, I think, sets up a lot of the plot of Contact. I think Contact is very in conversation with the WOW signal. Carl Sagan was involved with analyzing the signal when it was first recorded. So the WOW signal was discovered in 1977 by radio astronomer Jerry R. Ehman. You okay?
Sorry. This is why you don't drink while recording. Water, that is.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll let you. We can cut out as much of this as we need.
No, we should keep all of it in. This is this is good podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Setting the scene. It's 1977.
Great year.
We're in Ohio.
Great place.
At the Big Ear Telescope.
Even better place.
The Big Ear Telescope was a more early radio telescope array. Before they discovered stuff like interferometry, they were just trying to build a big telescope.
Right.
Arecibo's also in this of like a pre-interferometry telescope that just had big dishes possible.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Like pizza. Sorry.
Yeah. Jerry R. Ehman is at the helm of the controls, and they discover a signal at the hydrogen line. So it's that 1.42 gigahertz frequency, and there's a popular image that accompanies the WOW signal. It's the data printout where they've circled the numbers and it says WOW.
Right.
And I want to explain that. So what you're looking at is basically every tenth of a second, every half second, they have a magnitude printout. Mm-hmm. And so And that's a hexadecimal number, so it's between 0 and F. And so what you're looking at is basically there is a blip of a couple of seconds in the readout where, most of the frequencies most of the amplitudes they're reading are like 1 to 3 magnitude. And then there's 6 EJ, like all of these really high numbers of magnitude on channel 2. And so that was kind of the first thing that was, why they circled the data printout and wrote wow, is because it was by far the strongest thing anyone had ever observed on a radio telescope.
Right.
It was the signal itself. I've gone back and found the audio of it. It is a high pitched sine wave. when you pitch it down the 20 or so octaves you need to, it's the sound of a resonating sine wave. Mm-hmm. And the thing that is notable about it, and the reason it caused such a uproar in the physics community, is that it was by far the strongest thing that we had ever observed at the time. Carl Sagan consulted on analyzing the data. There's a letter between Carl Sagan and John Krauss, who was the director at Big Ear at the time, where Krauss just kind of gets into the nitty gritty of okay, here's what we've discovered, here's the data that we have. The signal was never heard a second time. It was never observed a second time at Big Ear. We'll get into that in a second. But because it was kind of just this one-off event, as they analyzed it further, it became kind of more and more apparent that it probably isn't extraterrestrial in nature. The signal was a sine wave, which, sine waves are cool, but they can be produced by nature. And we never heard the signal repeat, so it was probably not sent out intentionally if it was an extraterrestrial signal in origin.
Right.
In recent years, and I want to get into Jerry Emon, the guy who discovered it, categorically not a crank. Categorically a scientist doing his due diligence, doing his skepticism. I read he has a 30-year anniversary paper that he wrote about just here's everything we know about the signal 30 years on. And I think is really interesting. And he kind of has this section at the very end where he's yeah, I would love to believe that this is ET. I would love to believe that I heard the first signal from an extraterrestrial intelligence. That's so cool. That said, I have to be a skeptic, and honestly, the evidence doesn't seem like it's there for me.
Yeah.
So, we really don't have anything to levy against Emon. He made an incredible discovery and, did his scientific due diligence.
Right.
In the wake of that. There was 2 papers published by a group in the late 2010s, I want to say. I want to say it was 2018, 2019, maybe even into the early pandemic. But there were a series of papers released about where a group looked at historical data recorded at Arecibo and saw signals that looked really similar to what we observed with the WOW signal. And they noticed that they could identify some of those areas of sky as hydrogen gas clouds.
Gotcha.
And coming back through that extra data, coming back through those other recordings that were discovered of this event, their theory, which I think is incredibly compelling and also I think is incredibly cool, is that so basically there are these big quasi-star, quasi-pulsar objects in the universe called magnetars. They spin very, very fast. They put off a lot of electromagnetic radiation, and they're very fun to listen to with our radio telescopes because they make oscillating noises. Mm-hmm. And when magnetars can put off basically giant solar flares.
Sick.
in the same way that our sun puts off solar flares, magnetars do the same thing, but at more intensity because they're just more violent star systems. What this team theorizes happened is that some magnetar in that area of sky that I didn't observe directly and now don't have the means to, unfortunately, put off a giant flare and excited these big clouds of hydrogen that basically, you know how if you look really closely at a drop of water, it'll kind of lens the light.
Yeah. Kind of like a prism, like anything, like any prism. Medium, it affects light.
Hydrogen gas clouds can do that too with radio signals in the sky. And so this magnetar flare excites a bunch of hydrogen that both starts resonating at its 1.42 gigahertz natural resonant frequency because it's now full of energy from the magnetar flare.
Right.
And then also it is lensing this energy into a natural form of what's called a maser. If a laser is like a light pinpoint, laser is actually an acronym. I don't have written down in my notes what the acronym stands for, which I think is a shame.
Isn't it? It's light activated.
Light activated through electromagnetic radiation. I don't remember what the S is. Anyways, what you need to understand for this is that a maser is a microwave laser.
Shooting my maser. And
we also use masers for radio astronomy and for radio transmission. But yeah, so what the current standing theory about what the WOW signal was is that a magnetar somewhere in the universe put off a giant flare, excited a bunch of hydrogen to resonate at its natural frequency, and it lensed that signal such that it pointed very concentrated at Earth. Thereby, we recorded the strongest signal we've ever received from out in the cosmos.
Yeah.
But what that team that released those two papers in the 2010s did was they showed that the WOW signal was in all likelihood a natural phenomenon, which I think is so cool that you can that the universe can just create a natural microwave laser.
Right. Yeah.
10,000 light years away, a star puts off a microwave radiation pulse and it gets lensed perfectly at my house and cooks my popcorn. I think it's so crazy. I think it's so cool. And I thought that was an interesting thing to get into with the WOW signal. At the end of the day, you get to learn something cool about nature. And isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it's really cool. Your bit about it cooking your popcorn, not you can tell the dynamic in terms of what I'm about to say. This is very informative of the dynamic of you being really competent about the science and me having a media-addled brain. There's an episode of SpongeBob where something very similar happens. It's the episode where they give an origin story for Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy.
Yeah.
And part of it is like a radiation beam comes down from the sky and irradiates them or something.
That's more or less what the WOW signal was.
Yeah.
Errant beam of radiation, many such cases.
Yeah. I have, sorry guys, I had to develop boss baby syndrome for that one specific SpongeBob moment.
So anyways, yeah, that's the WOW signal. Categorically no cranks involved, at least, no cranks involved at the big kid table. There were definitely people speculating about this contemporaneously, and also people who continued to speculate about the WOW signal, even though we probably know what it was now.
Yeah, we have a pretty solid conclusion, and I think it was fun to speculate for a little bit and get excited about it, but now we have an answer. Yeah. And it's a cool moment in history that I think very clearly has its fingerprints all over this movie in a very fun way.
So cool. If you're going to read up something about it, I would definitely recommend reading Eamon's 30-year anniversary paper.
Yeah.
And also the letter between John Krause and Carl Sagan is so interesting.
Fuck yeah. Thank you for informing.
This has been the tinfoil segment. Back to the film.
Yes, back to the film. So we left off. Ellie is like storming into the facility, and I just want to shout out that we get this really cool long take of her basically pulling into the office in front of the facility. She's like driving full speed, comes in, turns in, parks, gets out of the car, runs into the building, starts going up the stairs, and runs into the office, and it's all one single take.
Yeah.
And it, again, I have a tendency to repeat myself on this podcast, but it's one of those, I think that's one of those dynamic camera moments that we don't get in movies anymore, where it's not like a huge set piece, but it helps sell the movie as like, this is a real place where people move in and out of it, and it's so it's so nice.
An incredible piece of like cinematographic craft.
Yes, absolutely. And so, like you said, they go through everything, and they point to it being like a SETI signal, like something from intelligent life, and it's a strong signal. And they figure out that it's coming from the star Vega, but then it suddenly like cuts out for a moment, and they're like, everybody looks so deflated and heartbroken.
This like real moment of tension.
Yeah, and Ellie like slowly reaches towards like the audio mixer that they have, and she goes to, I think she's like gonna turn it up or something, and then right as she touches it, it comes back to life.
Yeah.
And like everybody jumps. It's really awesome. And then they realize that it's counting out prime numbers. Which is notable because that's not something like, so when I say it's counting out prime numbers, it's basically doing a pulse and then pausing and then doing like, it goes like boom, boom, pause, boom, 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 pause, and it goes through all of the prime numbers from 2 through 101.
I absolutely loved this scene because I think the way that it explains what's going on to you, and the way that this part of the plot is presented, that it's pulsing in prime number intervals, this scene really sells you on counting to 11.
Yeah.
Because you hear the line of dialogue where she's like, okay, the first one was 2, the second one is 3, and now this one's 5. And then you watch both Fisher and Willie count out 7 to themselves. You see like Fisher's like tallying on his scratch paper,
and the other one's counting on his fingers.
And then you get this like moment where nobody talks, and you're just listening to those 11 pulses.
Yeah,
and you, the listener, you, the viewer, are counting them out. And I noticed that on my second watch that I was instinctively counting out for 11 pulses, and I was like, wow, the storytelling of the film did that to me.
Yeah.
And I just think that's like so choice and like such an excellent piece of craft that like it really got me as the viewer into the moment.
Yeah.
In a cool way.
And I think that speaks to the scene in and of itself, because it's very chaotic, but they situate you in the middle of them trying to figure this out in the office. And so I think it does a good job of like putting you in there as like not a member of a team, but like an observer who is getting invested in this moment, because you see everybody is so excited.
Yeah.
And they do such a good job of like looping you in on like what is compelling about this moment. And I think the book does a good job of this as well. I think this is one of those really cool moments where in the scene, or in the novel, they do a great job. Like Sagan does a good job of the scene where it captures that same like manic energy, where it's like it literally feels like you're spinning around this like circular control room.
Yeah.
And they like translate that to the screen so perfectly.
It's such a well done scene.
It's so well done. It's so compelling. But they argue about Vega. They say, it's too young. It doesn't have a planet. There's all this debris that would make it like really hard to like exist there.
Yeah.
But they call up an array in Australia, and they're like, "Can you confirm the signal?" And the Australian guy is like, "Yeah, they're coming from Vega."
and this is also an important piece of the science, because why they call Australia. The book says this explicitly, and the movie just or I think there's a scene where Drumlin explains this to Kits. But so they had to call up Australia because as the point source goes below the horizon in the northern hemisphere, you have to get a telescope in the southern hemisphere tracking it. So that you get that continuous tracking.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that it does that piece of storytelling very well and kind of continues adhering to the accuracy.
Yeah, because it's one of those cool moments where it gets the science correct, but it also primes the movie to be like, and this is why it's an international project, and this is why we have no choice. In the movie, they spend so much time, or in the novel, they spend so much time on like cooperation. I think this is a good point to talk about like the difference between like the Soviet Union still existing in the novel and it not existing in the movie. I'm gonna just shift my chair right now.
Yeah, me too.
So that we can cut all of this creaking. But in the novel, the Soviet Union still exists. It's 1985, but in the movie, it is a post-Cold War film.
Yeah.
And that just like it informs so much where the novel is concerned with like the interplay of the US and the Soviet Union as like these two superpowers, and it's a lot more. It spends a lot of time talking about like the unification of the world, basically, where there's like a commonality, this like thing for everybody to work on, and there is a lot of discussion of like basically like power brokering between these two superpowers, and like all of the scientists want to work together and collaborate, but the nations themselves, there is like a who is going to come out on top of this, and there's like a little bit of jockeying, but we also see that it is this moment to connect and come together. And I think it just like that one change is like has so many ramifications for the movie, for the story that they're telling. And it like changes so much in a really interesting way.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting the way in which like the movie talks about like the geopolitics inherent in this project. And I think it's so interesting how like I almost feel like the movie takes a more cynical tone than the book when it comes to like countries working together. I almost feel like the book is still playing in the space of like it's a fantasy novel where the whole world works together.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy novel in which the UN does something.
Yeah. I think the notable thing about the novel is that it is science fiction. It's like hard science fiction in terms of like this signal, but Sagan is also like sprinkling in like more mundane, like I guess like what I would call like Star Trek style science fiction. Like there are these little hints of like a world that is like different. Like there, like the news ecosystem is different in Contact. There are like hollow magazines and like all of these different like small changes where there is the science fiction goes beyond just this signal, and we go into a world where like technology is changing for everyday people because of the machine and like how they're doing research into this alien signal, and it like affects everything. And the movie just like doesn't really touch that. And I think that kind of like plays into the fact that you think it, like you said, it's like it feels more cynical because Sagan is imagining a different world.
Yeah.
The movie is Sagan's like, what if this happened in a different world? The movie is like, what if this happened in our world? Is like the best way that I can describe it.
And the movie is aggressively engaging with the idea that this is our world to the extent that they got a sitting president to film his own role.
Yeah. Well, do you know how? Well, we can get to this later, but do you know how they got those lines?
I don't.
Okay, we'll talk about that because it's really interesting.
I'm aware of the real life speech that Bill Clinton gave when they potentially had discovered microbes on Mars, and then they later realized they hadn't.
Yeah,
I'm aware of that, but I'm not aware of how they got Bill Clinton to do his lines for this movie.
Okay, we'll get to that, but you're halfway there.
Yeah,
I'll say. But yeah, I think that's like an important context where that's one of the larger changes in the translation. But moving on, the next day, Blackhawks fly into the site, and reporters are like sort of like announcing this. Like basically Ellie and the team go public immediately. They just like, they tell everybody as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And the US government just shows up and they're like, hey, what the fuck? Why'd you do that? They're talking to Drumlin about like what they have. And then he is like, grab a decryption team. Like we need like our best people on this. He mentions Lunacharsky is visiting Caltech. Lunacharsky is like a Soviet scientist in the novel that they cut from the movie.
They just like mention him.
Yeah, they mention him. He's kind of like Ellie's like older science guy bestie. So we reach like the discussion of like the nature of the signal, and this is kind of like, this moment is a fundamental contact movie trope, where people don't understand how like translation and communication between aliens would work.
Yeah.
Because Drumlin is like, why is it so rudimentary? Why not speak English?
Sorry, Kit says this, and then this is the one time in the film we actually see Drumlin stick his neck out for Dr. Arroway.
Well, Ellie walks in and she says that 70% of the Earth speaks other languages, and that mathematics is the only like universal language. And this is something that comes up, and we've talked about this together about like Stargate Arrival. There is always government officials who fail to understand that like aliens don't know English, and there's no way for them to like learn English just like off the go. We need to establish some sort of universal like, we need to start somewhere, and the best place to start is math.
And once again, this is like Sagan speaking directly through the character. Is like, this was the entire basis of his Voyager work.
And this is a trope that I think they do well here because they kind of touch on it and move on. But other movies, Arrival I love, but there's like so many conversations about the nature of translation that just like paint characters as like literal toddlers and like deeply unintelligent, which I think is part of the point in that movie, but it can be frustrating.
And I think an important thing to recognize in this movie is that like, I think part of the reason that there is so little time spent on accepting the principle that like math is the way that we would communicate with extraterrestrials.
Right.
To me, it feels so much like that just has to be because Carl Sagan spent so much time thinking about it. He didn't want to then spend all of this time in his fiction novel, like having to justify it.
Yeah, I think
it really speaks to me as with him as the author about they treat it like this line of dialogue is the only conflict we get about that idea in the film, and I think so much of that is probably just Carl Sagan being like, this is a foregone conclusion. I have spent so much time arguing with people in real life about this conclusion.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of like, I don't want to say like hand waving it, but like they do a good job of being like, well, they wouldn't know English. They like, there's just the first signal that they get, we'll talk about this in a bit, but like the first signal that they receive from us is in German. And so like there's so many reasons that they don't speak to us in English, most of all, which is America is not the center of the world. And I think that's one of those things that this movie kind of like, it goes back to Palmer Joss's like research into how technology affects areas outside of the imperial core, and it's, I think, something that the novel contends with because of the Cold War, but this movie sort of like glances over is just like, America is not the center of the universe, and we need to accept that if we're going to like actually engage with this in any meaningful way.
I think it's also really interesting as like a poignant analysis on like how aliens get constructed in sci-fi too. Of I would say that like something you realize consuming enough of this type of media is that it's really hard to create an alien species that isn't just a reflection of yourself.
Right.
It's really hard to construct an other that isn't just a reflection of what you find to be othering.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's like, I think the way that they talk about it in the scene is a really like salient indignation of that, and a really like self-aware piece of the genre.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, yeah, I think you said it perfectly. But Ellie tries explaining the prime numbers thing to the G-men, but they just like stare at her blankly and don't get it. And Drumlin brings up that like people have been like listening to Vega for years. Why now? And Ellie explains that they started broadcasting 26 years ago. And so something happened 52 years ago to make them start broadcasting, basically. We get introduced to Michael Kitts, who is the national security advisor. He interrupts him, but Ellie kind of like ignores him, and she's like, hey, can you get the guys with the guns out of here? This is supposed to be a civilian base.
Queen.
We love her. And so she says that, and then we get a reverse shot of Kitts sort of scowling, and then the camera slowly pans to the left to a bunch of soldiers that we haven't seen in the shot yet.
Yeah.
Who just like haven't appeared in the scene, and it's it's really fucking funny.
They're just a foreboding presence.
Yeah, it's just like the entire previous conversation is now recharacterized with the fact that there are like 6 soldiers with like machine guns just standing there. And he like waves them off. And then Kitts like goes to talk again, and then Ellie ignores him again to welcome Clark back to the site. And Kitts finally gets to say his piece, which is basically that, you know, this could be a breach of national security because they told everybody. And Ellie's like, well, it's not a person-to-person communication. They weren't like, we're going to talk to the U.S. This is for everybody. And she's like, are you really going to classify prime numbers? Which I think is like I love that line.
The U.S. government would.
Yeah, they would. They'll classify anything.
Actually, there are illegal prime numbers. This is like a huge thing in encryption, is that there are some really, really big prime numbers that, like the extremely large prime numbers they use to encode DVDs so that you can't rip them. That actually is an illicit prime number. You're not allowed to publish that number. It's illegal.
What the fuck?
It's so weird.
we gotta talk about this in more detail.
Not only will the U.S. government classify prime numbers, they have.
Crazy, the crazy thing to learn. But continuing, Drumlin jumps in and he says that it's like necessary because the very large array can only listen to so many hours before Vega sets beyond the horizon, and they can't track it. So this is basically like a quick and dirty like, we need to work together. Like, there's no way around this if we want to actually like study this.
And I want to reemphasize, this was notable to me as the only place in the film that Drumlin sticks his neck out for Dr. Arroway.
Yeah, this is the one time.
This is like, we'll get to some of these differences as they occur in the book, but I find that really interesting. Of like, this is the brief shining moment where we get to see good Dr. Drumlin. Yeah,
and I'm almost curious if it's like he's actually being good to Ellie, or if this is just like him like being like, hey, like, no, we need to, this is a necessary thing, and he's just kind of like, he's telling Kitts that so that the project will continue and he can eventually take over.
It like might be both, but I definitely read that as Dr. Drumlin stepping in to keep Ellie from getting thrown in federal prison. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, he doesn't like her, but doesn't want her to go to prison. Yeah. Bare minimum, guys. They like, Kitts goes to like argue more, but then Clark shushes everyone because he is like, he's listening to the transmission and he's like, guys, I heard another layer. And so they plug a TV in with the new data, and they start like cleaning it up and like zooming out, and they find a swastika on the TV. Surprise, it's Hitler.
Surprise Hitler. The worst kind. Actually, no, there are so many bad kinds. All of them are the worst kind.
I don't like non-surprise Hitler either.
Yeah, I don't like any of them. It's hard to say that there's a worst version of Hitler.
Flaming hot take.
Yeah. But they basically start like projecting this data. There's a second layer to the message that is visual data, and it is the broadcast of Hitler at the 1936 Olympics, which was, they explained, the first like television broadcast strong enough to reach Vega. It was like at the time it was like Nazi Germany being like, we're so powerful. Look at how powerful our television broadcasts are. And that is the first thing to reach Vega. And so they basically explain that like them sending that back to us is basically like, hi, we see you, like we received this. Yeah. Bad first impression. Everybody
Terrible
agrees.
First impression.
We
really caught us with our pants down.
Yeah, literally. We jump to the White House. Like Ellie is at the White House, and there's this character, Rachel Constantine. We don't actually know what her position is.
She's like an advisor to the president.
Yeah, I was like, is she like? So we'll get to the president thing, I think now, but like, is she? Is she like the Secretary of State? Is she like the press secretary? Like there are so many different positions that I feel like she could be, and they never like define it.
That's true, yeah.
Which I found kind of frustrating.
I feel like they didn't give her character near enough depth for the amount of speaking time she had.
Yeah. And I love her character. Like I love the glimpses of her character that we get. I think she's really great and would have been a good addition to explore more as like a woman in a position of power and like a male dominated field.
Well, and I think like the text that we see, you know, I think some of this was like the movie is already pushing 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Much like this podcast. But I think it's really interesting how like we really see her in this mediator role that is a lot more present in the book than it is in the film.
Yeah.
But I think like the text that's there for Rachel Constantine is fantastic.
Yeah.
I love her character. I think it's really fascinating how her character is really in this like kettled environment where she has to placate the national security people against what the scientists need.
Yeah.
Also like a person who like is pretty unique in sticking her neck out for Dr. Arroway.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I love her character, and I would have loved to see more depth added to the character of Rachel Constantine.
Yeah,
and I get why it isn't, but I still think it should have. I still think it should have happened. I would watch 3 Hour Contact.
Yeah, I would. I don't know if I would. I would watch a different cut of 2.5 Hour Contact. I think the movie as is kind of like pushing the upper limits of like how long I want it to be. But
fair enough.
I do agree that I would love to see more of her. And so she gets introduced. Basically, the president, who is Bill Clinton, is giving an address, and Ellie and Drumlin are there. Basically, like the idea, the plan supposedly is Clinton gives an address, and then Ellie goes up and gives a speech to explain the findings as like the person who actually found it.
Yeah.
But Drumlin instead. So Bill Clinton gives a speech about like how it's like a great like scientific discovery. And the thing is, Bill Clinton was not involved in this production at all.
Yeah.
They just used like news footage of him giving this address, and some various other news footage. And they basically like did some like digital restoration and editing to composite people into shots alongside him to make it look like he was involved. And so there's this story about, I don't remember who the actor was going to be, but they were going to get somebody to play the president, but they didn't want to do it. Like they backed out. And then Bill Clinton gave this speech about the Allen Hills 84001 meteorite like the week after. And apparently Robert Zemeckis, the director, was like jaw dropped while he was watching it because he was like, "This is perfect."
They've just handed them the dialogue they need on a platter.
Yes, exactly. And then later on, there's a part where Bill Clinton gives an address, and he's like, "I would recommend that you don't like inflame the situation," and that one's about Saddam Hussein. So the dichotomy of man,
Saddam Hussein in his hiding spot.
Yeah. And so that's sort of how they cut him into this movie. Notable because in the book, the president is a woman. And I think Rachel Constantine's character kind of comes up as like, I think the president in the novel sort of becomes Rachel Constantine in a lot of ways. And then Bill Clinton is the actual president.
Yeah.
I have like mixed feelings about this, not to like get super into this, but I think the president being a woman in the novel, cool, and I think that is part of Sagan like imagining a different world, and that kind of sells it.
Huge part of Sagan imagining a different and better world.
Yeah. But the thing that like complicates it for me, and I think this is an interesting thing, is like that the novel and the movie are both interested in like misogyny that like the misogyny that Ellie faces. And I think one of the like fumbles for the book is that they have a woman president, but they don't like examine the misogyny that she faces enough.
Yeah.
And so it creates this dissonance where it's like, well, if, you know, not that like voting in one woman president means that misogyny is solved.
Yeah.
But it creates this like dissonance where there isn't like an exploration and like a synthesis of the misogyny that Ellie faces and the misogyny that this president very clearly would face.
Yeah, and I think I do think the book spends a lot more energy on exploring that misogyny. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm not sure how I feel one way or the other about like that change between the book and the film.
Yeah.
I think it was like jaw-dropping to see them reveal the president as the president who was sitting during this film.
Yeah, that was crazy.
I thought that was just like astounding.
Yeah.
I really did not expect Bill Clinton to be in this movie.
Yeah, Bill Clinton jump scare.
But no, I think that's like this is a piece of media that's really exploring misogyny in its relation to science, misogyny in its relation to power. I think the motif of the woman president and how that gets folded into this advisor character, I think is really interesting, and I could spend another hour talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't have another hour to talk about it.
We don't.
Rather than Ellie getting introduced, Drumlin gets announced as the head of the Discovery team, and he gets to give the speech instead, which is fucked up. And then back at the array, Clark discovers a third layer to the message from Vega. Quick explanation. Basically, the original footage of the Olympics was 25 frames per second, which is like around the average for like filming things. I think 24 is like the actual or like the contemporary like average amount of frames for like movies and TV shows. But it was filmed in 25, and the Vegans broadcasted it back at 50 frames per second. And each frame has a marker at the top of the screen, which can be assembled into further visual data. So basically, like, the footage can be assembled into, like, text and images, and they get, like, tens of thousands of pages of data.
Yeah. I want to add, the 25 frames a second thing is not because of film's 24 frames a second. It's because of the PAL standard for TV frame rates.
Oh, gotcha.
So this difference is, if you're a nerd about CRT televisions, which I imagine a lot of this podcast audience is, you know that NTSC versus PAL, NTSC is like the North American standard for TVs. PAL is the standard for the rest of the world. Obviously, these things were like being ironed out in the 30s and 40s. But the important part is that both systems exist because they're based off of the frequency power runs at in their respective country.
Interesting.
So in Europe in 1940s, the power was already running at 50 hertz. And so it made sense to put the timing of the camera at 25 hertz, which is 2 cycles of a power strip.
Fascinating.
And that's why those standards exist, is because the US uses 60 hertz power, so 30 frames per second makes sense for our TV, or the reality, which is it's like 29.997 frames a second, but we don't have time to get into that.
You're schooling me right now.
The North America uses something very, very close to 30 frames a second because our power runs at 60 hertz. The rest of the world uses something analogous to uses exactly 25 frames per second because their power runs at 50 hertz.
Gotcha. I must be thinking about like movie projection in theaters.
Yeah, movies are their own deal.
Yeah, which makes sense. But the so Ellie starts explaining this to Constantine, Drumlin, and Kitts. Ellie says that it could be the first volume of an Encyclopedia Galactica, which is a reference to something in Asimov's novel. Why didn't I write it down? Why can't I remember it? Foundation? Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, I think Hitchhiker's Guide is also referencing this Asimov book that I also don't know the name of.
Yeah.
But it comes up in Hitchhiker's Guide also.
Yeah, it is a...
So this is like a popular science fiction idea.
Yeah.
Is the Encyclopedia Galactica.
And I like that she throws it out there. Kit says it could be instructions for how the aliens are going to colonize us, and then Drumlin says that it could be a few million new commandments. And Ellie explains that they need to find a primer before Drumlin announces that he's taking over. So basically they need to find a way to translate everything because it's in alien text.
Yeah.
And then they need to find a primer. And then Drumlin's like, okay, I'm taking over. And Kitz recommends that it be militarized. So everybody's like, okay, Ellie, you're gone. Bye-bye. And then Ellie gets really mad and she says that it's her project, that she knows the most. And Constantine is like, yeah, she's going to be in charge, guys. She is the leading expert in this subject.
Yeah.
Then we cut to a mysterious figure aboard a plane watching TV, and we basically get like a bunch of like newscasts. Religious service attendances are up. Neo-Nazis are clashing with the police in streets, and we see that Jay Leno is still unfunny in this universe.
Yeah. Also a direct reference to the Heaven's Gate cult, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was like confirmed in what you researched, but I looking it up just now. The Heaven's Gate suicide incident happened in March of 1997, and this film came out in July of 97.
That might have been a little late in terms of production for it to come up, but I think that is one of those they're similar. Yeah,
and like not ununique as doomsday cults go. I mean, like also Jonestown happened in the 70s.
Yeah. The novel gets into it a lot, but like there's like millennium based like doomsday predictions and everything.
Yeah. At the very least, we can say that audiences watching the movie saw that scene and thought about Heaven's Gate because it had happened 6 months prior.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we cut to the Very Large Array in New Mexico again, as Ellie is like entering the site, but there are like masses of campers and onlookers outside the array. There are like UFO truthers, different religious sects, people who are like worshipping vegans.
A weird guy with blonde hair who almost looks like Palmer Joss.
Yes. So yeah, there are neo-Nazis, just like general weirdos. And then like the final person that we see is like a fire and brimstone preacher who is like super pale, super blonde, like platinum blonde. And he just like gives Ellie the death stare of all time.
And I think I read in this scene, as at least my first watch, I very much read this as Ellie's looking at him being like, is that Joss? Is that Palmer Joss?
Interesting.
It's not.
No, it's not. I didn't pick up on that. But I think that's an interesting point of like, that is like what a more militaristic Palmer Joss would look like.
And I just think it's interesting I feel like there is some misdirection given when we're shown this character.
Interesting.
We'll get into this later.
Yeah.
As we get through the plot, I feel like my thesis will become more apparent.
Yeah. But this character, this fire and brimstone preacher that we never get the name of, he introduces the idea that the message is from God, not aliens, and he like rails against the scientists.
I think the UFO crank scene is a really good one. It's a part of the film that I really enjoy.
I really love that. There's like a bunch of different music that's playing.
The Vegas impersonator. They're the Elvis impersonator from Vegas.
Yeah, that one's really good. I remembered the thing that I wanted to touch on. When I was reading the book, like the aliens from Vega, they're called vegans.
Yeah.
But because of the way things are spelled, it looks like vegans.
Yeah, the vegans.
And the first time that I read it in the book, I got real confused. Which is not my proudest moment, but I think really fucking funny that I was like, why are vegans being brought up? Yeah, I just wanted to include that. But cutting forward...
We meet aliens from another planet, and they're really mad at us for eating beef.
Specifically beef. They love those cows.
Yeah. They love to abduct and mutilate them.
Yeah.
That's another episode.
Yeah, we got to talk about that at some point. At her apartment, Ellie receives a computer message and phone call from an anonymous source who has a piece of the message, and they kind of like taunt her. And they tell her to meet in an airfield where she is brought aboard the airplane of one S.R. Haddon, the super billionaire who has been funding her projects from behind the scenes. Production note, apparently he was based on what would happen if a Bill Gates type lost his mind.
I love that. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I love S.R. Haddon's character. He's such a megalomaniac.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this line is in reference to another more famous work or if other works are referencing Contact. Mm-hmm. But the line where Dr. Arroway starts to like put put two threads together, and he says, "Clever girl." I thought was so fantastic. I love the way that he's just like an evil billionaire mad scientist.
Yeah, he is very fun in that way. I don't know if Clever Girl is a reference to anything in particular. I mean,
think it's
Jurassic Park comes to mind.
Yeah.
But that's the only one that I can think of.
Yeah, I think also like newer. I think it like somewhere in Stephen Moffat, Doctor Who. I think it gets said.
That's a nice through line.
Yeah,
that's a nice connection.
I think that's where I clocked the line as being from, and I was like, well, surely that's referencing Contact rather than Contact referencing a TV show that wouldn't be made for 20 years.
I would think so. Listener, if you know the real truth, get in the comments and tell us.
If you know the origins of the trope of the line "clever girl" spoken like that,
get in the comments no matter what. But they begin talking, and he says that he's been keeping track of her for a long time and that she's one of his best investments. Total creep. He gives a summary of her life from like beginning to like contemporary times, with like a startling amount of detail down to how she likes her tea.
I always do my homework.
Yeah. I think he's such a creep, and he's like so like.
Oh, he's a total creep.
Yeah, I just think I like that he's your favorite character in this movie.
I think he is. He's just such an evil scientist.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of I don't think you've seen Blade Runner, but in Blade Runner, there's like a billionaire, like engineer, scientist, who's like kind of like one of the main antagonists.
Yeah.
And he has like very similar vibes.
I think some of what I find so endearing about his character is like what Dr. Klein in Fallout Old World Blues feels like a character that's very based on his mannerisms, or like Dr. Farnsworth from Futurama. It all feels very in this, like, he plays the character of mad scientist so well.
Yes, he does. He does a great job of it. He's very aloof in a fun way.
Also completely not present in the book.
No, he is.
Oh, he's in the.
So this is the important thing.
Oh, is this one of the things that got... Okay, so a little behind baseball for the listener. When I read the book, I checked out the audiobook from the library, not realizing that the 5-hour audiobook that my library has that's voiced by Jodie Foster is like incredibly, incredibly abridged.
Yeah.
And apparently one of the things they abridge out of the book entirely is the presence of S.R. Haddon.
This was so Nat listened to the book before I did, and then I went to like go listen to it, and I was like, why are there two versions? One is Jodie Foster, and then there's so that one's like 4 or 5 hours.
It's like 5 hours, yeah.
And then there's a 14-hour version, and I was like, Nat, I have bad news. I have really bad news. There is a longer version, unadulterated, where S.R. Haddon. So S.R. Haddon, crazy character in the book. One of the production notes that I saw is that his name is based off of like a Mesopotamian king. And that is mirrored in the book because he is, he owns this like adult amusement park called Babylon. And there are like Ishtar gates, and it's like this crazy place where people go and they do like kink stuff, and they get freaky with it.
Fuck, I need to read this book.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really weird and out of left field, but it's part of Sagan imagining a different world. It's really interesting.
I'm gonna borrow your copy when we're done with this episode.
Oh, most definitely. You gotta let me know what you think.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about Haddon's death later on, but there's like a big change there. But yeah, he's in the book. Less important, I would say. He's kind of like Joss in the novel. He's like a little like he's like more neutral character, smaller character. But he explains in the movie. He explains that he wants to get Ellie back in the game. And he's like, I have a lot of enemies, but I want to make one more contribution to the world before I die. And Ellie's like, you found the primer, and this is where he goes, clever girl,
from whom I've taken so much.
And it's the last piece required to decode the message from Vega, and he basically explains that like the solution was to arrange the pages three-dimensionally rather than two-dimensionally.
This is a really good aha moment that the film does a good job of showing.
Yeah, and it's cool. There's like a computer visualizing it where it like folds in and makes a cube. I really like it. And as the computer is like visualizing it for her, we cut to, in like this really smooth transition, Ellie presenting the primer to the White House and revealing that the message contains instructions to build a machine. They don't know what it does, but kits and military types are saying that it's a Trojan horse, or like it could be a Trojan horse. And Ellie says, she like pushes back, and then Kits is like, "Why are eggheads always so trusting?"
There's a really good line where one of the military brass people says it could be some kind of doomsday device.
Which they talk about the doomsday device so much in the novel.
Yeah.
But thankfully they breeze past it in the movie, because I think if I had to hear people talk about it anymore, I would go insane.
A doomsday device.
I'm sure that general would love to get his hands on it.
Yeah.
But Ellie says that, like, basically, like, humanity doesn't pose a threat. It would be like destroying microbes on an anthill, and then Drumlin counters by asking if we'd feel remorse about destroying those microbes. Which is, I like that as, like, a counterpoint of, like, if we're so insignificant, what difference does it make?
Yeah. And it's good characterization for him.
Yeah. It's very good. And then we get there's this guy who's basically, like, the head of like a conservative coalition who is like advising the Clinton White House basically as like an opposition voice, and like, you're gonna lose the conservative vote if you do this. I don't remember, his name is like Rankin or something in the movie, but in the book there's this character Billy Joe Rankin who is kind of like a counterpart to Palmer Josh, and he's a televangelist, like very flamboyant televangelist. And he seems to have been like molded into this character, this very, very minor character who he says he jumps into this conversation and he says, "We don't know the moral character of the message or if the Vegans believe in God." And Ellie says that if the message was religious, it would have been a burning bush or a voice in the sky. And then Joss does his like apparition thing.
But that's exactly what you say you found.
Yeah, he appears behind her, like teleports in, and he says like you said, like, that's exactly what you found, Ellie. And he agrees that there are religious implications, but that they don't have to be alarmists. And then he looks at Ellie when he does like the deep puppy dog eye thing, and he says he hopes they can come to a common ground and break through any obstacles that kept them apart, which I find kind of endearing. This is the McConaughey charm.
Yeah.
He kind of turns the charm on in this moment, and like Ellie, you can see Ellie like kind of gets it.
All right.
I love that McConaughey keeps showing up in science fiction movies like this. Like we'll talk about Interstellar eventually.
Interstellar's coming up,
and he's got his hands all over these. But later that night, there's like a reception party, and there are Christian protesters outside. We see the same we see Blondie. The band Blondie. We see the preacher, and he like stares down Ellie again. They got a real like. Does this mean he kind of looks like a mole rat?
Like a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
He looks skeezy.
Yeah.
And once again, this is a scene that really, I feel like, misdirected me, because I was like, okay, the first time we see him, she's confused and is like, is this Palmer Joss having like fallen quite a ways? And then we see him a second time after she's like been reacquainted with Palmer Joss at the White House. Mm-hmm. And it feels like we're seeing him again and being like, okay, this isn't Palmer Joss. This is just some other nutcase who looks like him.
Interesting. I really like that read, because that's not something that came to mind for me, or like on my initial watch. But I do like that as like a.
Maybe I'm just bad at faces.
Well, no. I'm not. I don't want to imply that you're bad at faces. I like that read as like, I think that's like a very reasonable read, because I think it in terms of like Joss's character, like it's. I think it makes sense that he might go that way.
Yeah.
Like that is like a possibility of him being radicalized. Yes. But she shows up there's like some conversation, but eventually Ellie and Joss slip out to the balcony and debate the existence of God. Joss says he can't imagine a world without God, and Ellie says that she needs proof. And then Joss asks her to prove that she loved her father before they're interrupted.
Dick move.
Yeah. This is the mirror of her being like, are you sure you didn't just like, your brain didn't make that up because you needed that experience? But I think, I don't know how I feel about Joss's point. I think it's like kind of compelling where it's like, you can't really like, this is like love. This is not a feeling that you can prove as like a physical thing. It's just something you feel in your heart. And I think that's something that he's trying to communicate to Ellie in kind of a dick move way.
Yeah, I like it. I think like the point that the script is making is really interesting and really like poignant to the plot, and at the same time I'm like, yeah, way to go, Mr. Pastor, emotionally manipulating somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. But they get interrupted by the latest discovery, and it is like the completed plans, and inside there is a person like inside this like circle dodecahedron thing, and it basically confirms Ellie's theory that the instructions are to build some sort of like transport to Vega. The White House staff have a meeting where the president decides that they're going to build the machine as an international effort, and they're setting up an international selection committee to decide who gets to go on the trip, and Joss is on the board. We also find out that Dremlin has stepped down as national science advisor to like pursue being a candidate for this. In the book, they spend a lot more time talking about like whether or not the Soviets and the US are going to collaborate. And then they go into like great detail about all of the different nations and their stakes in this process and like the selection committee.
The movie is a lot more general about that.
Yeah.
I think the only specifics we get into is the Japan system subs-contract.
Yes, that's like the one thing that we go over. And I think Sagan was a lot more interested in talking about like the politicking of like how people got like, because in the novel it's important to note that in the movie only one person goes. In the novel there's 5 people.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more room to talk about how they get to like divvy up who goes and what nations are represented, which I find really interesting.
Yeah. And this is part of, for me, where I really love this piece as a piece of science drama, because like that is absolutely drama that would be playing out in real life and that does play out in real life.
Yeah. And it's really awesome. And I think part of it is the movie kind of just imagines a world where like inevitably the US like hegemony results in an American scientist going.
Yeah.
But the novel is like, well, this is a world where there's a conversation and people of different faiths and different backgrounds and from different places go. And there's like there's diversity in the people that we send to space.
Yeah.
Which I love. But we get a montage about the committee being set up, the overrepresentation of U.S. candidates in the pool, the ballooning cost of the project, Haddon's involvement, and Japan being a major construction player, like the subcontracts that you mentioned. And finally, there's an interview with Ellie where she's asked about how dangerous the mission is.
There's also a segment where there's like a right stuff guy who's like in the running and drops out because his kids ask him not to go.
Yeah, that comes up a little bit later.
Oh, it's later.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's an interview with Ellie, and she's like one of the candidates. And the interviewer is like, this is so dangerous. Like, how can you willingly do this? And like, how can you believe it's a good idea to like potentially endanger a life? And she says, all it requires is a sense of, and he interrupts her and he goes, faith. And she says, I was going to say a sense of adventure.
Our another 2 of 3 rule of threes moment is the speaking of the word faith with such contempt. Yeah.
Yeah. The 3 times will a person lean into the camera, eyes bulging, and go, faith. The last one really hits.
Yeah.
It's awesome. The astronaut drops out because his kids don't want him to go. We get like a little moment where
Daddy, don't go.
Daddy, don't go. And he's like, well, how could I say no to that? And he looks like pissed.
Yeah.
He's like, well, my kids don't want me to go.
He's a fucking test pilot. Of course he wants to do it.
Yeah, like, who wouldn't want to do that if you're, like, in that position? But because of that, Ellie has become the top candidate.
I love that he's the one, like, stereotypical astronaut character we get. Spiritually, this guy drives a Corvette. I feel like this was, like, the one nod we got to, like, an Apollo program type guy.
Yeah, absolutely. In her hotel room, Ellie gets a message. Joss wants to talk. He asks about special relativity, noting that if she went to Vega and back, it would be 4 years for her, but 50 years on Earth. Ellie says that she knows it's dangerous and the implications, but Joss asks why she's so ready and willing to give her life for the mission. And she explains that she's been searching for a reason for human existence and that the possibility of an answer is worth her life. It's worth one human life to her.
Yeah.
And then Joss is like, okay, and then they kiss about it, I guess.
They do, in fact, kiss during this, like, job interview.
Yeah, pretty much. Then I'm glad that we're breezing through this more.
Yeah.
At the selection committee, Ellie is asked a final question. Like, we skip through her over, like, her entire interview process, and we just get this final set of questions. And she's asked, what one question would you ask the Vegans? And she says that she would ask, how did you do it? How did you evolve? How did you survive the technological adolescence without destroying yourself? And they're like, okay, we'll move on to your final statement. But before she can, Joss interrupts and asks if she considers herself a spiritual person. Ellie, who is not PR trained, squirms. And she's like, oh, well. And then he goes for the kill shot and he says,
do you believe in God?
Yeah. And she gives a non-committal answer saying that there isn't evidence either way. And that kind of ruins her chance of being the candidate.
Yeah, he really nips her in the bud here.
Yeah. And again, McConaughey has, like, the wettest eyes because he's like, I'm betraying you, but, like, this is something that I need to do.
I'm betraying you because I don't want you to go.
Yeah. And
Sorry,
then,
that was too Clinton.
Bubba, I didn't say this, but, like, I was really surprised that Bubba shows up in this movie.
Yeah.
At Drumlin's interview, he says that he's religious, and I get the sense that he goes after Ellie, and he kind of purposefully, like, snipes at her and is like, well, I'm religious and I'm the right person to go because I have faith or something like that.
Yeah. It very much an example, like, the scene of him being like, I'm just gonna tell them exactly what they want to hear.
Yes. And he admits that later. Josh shows up to Ellie's hotel room and she asks why he chose Drumlin and not her. And Josh says he couldn't imagine voting for someone who doesn't believe in God, who thinks 95% of the population is experiencing some sort of mass delusion. And then Ellie says she told her truth and gives Joss back the compass. And I like that as, like, a moment for Joss where I can understand that point of view, where it's like, if Ellie doesn't have a ton of compassion for, like, the religious viewpoint, or she doesn't, like, communicate it very much, and that I can understand why, if you are a deeply religious person, you look at her statement and you're kind of like, do you have compassion for these people who you think are kind of dumb?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's, like, a good reason not to send her.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting, the sort of her statement on it, where she's like, well, I know that you know that Drumlin feels similarly about this to me. He just told you what you wanted to hear because he's a cynic.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an important piece of characterization in this scene, and also in sort of Arroway and Drumlin's last conversation in the next.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ellie gives Joss back the compass, and then we cut to the machine being complete. There's just, like, a huge time jump. And
we get a couple of good shots of them, like, using the vehicle assembly stuff to carry elements out to the... It's like they're building this thing at Cape Canaveral.
Yeah, which is really cool. It kind of, the best way that I can describe it is it looks kind of like a model of an atom.
Yeah, it's very that Rutherford model of the atom, where you've got, like,
electron rings.
Yeah, a bunch of rings going around.
Yeah.
It's a very cool science fiction prop.
Yeah. And apparently it was a prop originally meant for Terminator 2.
Oh, interesting.
Which I find really interesting. It was going to be like a time machine thing, which is neat. but they're basically preparing for a full system test before they like do the launch. And Drumlin speaks with Ellie before heading to the machine, and he says that I mentioned this like way earlier, but he says that he thinks it's unfair that he was chosen and that he wishes they lived in a world where Ellie's idealism was rewarded, but unfortunately they don't live in that world. And Ellie quietly says that she always believed the world is what we make of it, which is kind of a, like, she kind of owns him with that one, I have to say.
I think this is a very poignant line in 2026, given that we're like living through this like trendy moment with large language models.
Yeah.
Where everyone not everyone, where rich people with riches and power want to act like it's like the end of technology and that it's inevitable and that like, oh, like you should just prepare for AI to like upend the world instead of like it, you know, it, I feel like Drumlin is taking this same like position on the side of like the world is like, you know, he's blaming the world for being unfair, but he's not taking any accountability for the fact that he is acting unfairly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the same way that like consent is being manufactured, like in regards to AI. He is selling himself this story of, well, that's how it is, and so I just have to play that way, rather than like examining ways to counteract that and like be the change that you want to see in the world, sort of. A very, very compelling moment.
And the film text is very aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in the command center, Ellie watches as they slowly begin the test, and it kicks off to a good start. I just want to shout out that like the CGI, it's 1997, and so CGI isn't like, it hasn't reached its like pinnacle, I would say.
The CGI in this is really, really good.
It's really good, and I think part of what sells it is that they always show the machine from a distance, like the entirety of it from like a great distance. They show it through lower quality cameras, so like the cameras that people are using on site.
Also the like military jet flyover, which was, I'm pretty sure CG also does this, where it's
really?
Like it's shown. Yeah, they do like a military jet flyover before the system test starts, and it's shown through a CRT television, and I was like, oh, that speaks to me as they're doing that to kind of hide the fact that it's like immature CG.
I didn't realize, because like the jet flyover, I thought that was like they got like the military stunt jet fighter pilots, like the Blue Angels or whatever, to do that. But
I guess it's like also a probable enough thing that you like don't want to expect that it's CG.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that shot was CG though.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But yeah, like they use the lower quality cameras and monitors to like help like mask it, and it's enough fuzz that it like really sells it as like a real place and a real thing. And I really love that. And it's just like, it's late 90s CGI, but it is effective, and it's one of those things where they use it sparingly and accurately. And I think a lot of modern filmmaking, the over-reliance on CGI gets a lot of like oxygen spent to talk about it. But this is an example of like the artistic blending of CGI and how it can enhance a practical movie.
No, I think the CGI in this film is so interesting, and I think the fact that it came out at a time where CG was less mature than it is now and less pervasive than it is now.
Yeah.
I think the places that they use CGI in this film are so tasteful and well done.
Yeah.
Because I think they were aware that there was so little they could do that would work.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into like the big climax of this scene, I want to explore a narrative element I really like, in which this scene does a runtime gag, and I think in that spirit we should also do a runtime gag. I think we should go to break.
We can go to break. I had break 2 points after this.
Amazing. When we come back, we can talk about the rest of this scene.
Sounds good.
No ads this time. 24 hours of podcast. If you got served an ad during that break, sorry.
But coming right back, I do want to also 24 hours of podcast, but also there's still an hour left in this movie.
Yeah.
It's a long one.
Yeah, I feel like maybe before the break I didn't explore enough what I meant by this film is doing a runtime gag, because you were confused by that.
Yeah.
The film, I feel, in this system test scene, there's so much pomp it's really treated like a space launch. And I feel like the visual language that this scene is really giving us is that this is kind of the climactic finale of the film. I think if you've read the book, or if you're just like more familiar with this text, or God forbid, if you're watching it on home video and you can see the runtime at the bottom of the screen when we get to this scene, I think you're a little bit more aware that like this system test does not go as planned. Yeah. But I think the film is really trying to sell the viewer, especially the film is really trying to sell like the movie theater viewer that this is the climactic finale. Yeah,
this is the scene is the kickoff for Act 3, but Act 3 is 50 minutes long.
Yeah. And the gag comes in when you're watching it on home video and you look down at the timer and there's an hour of the film left.
Yeah, it's a great gag, Zemeckis, thanks. But I will say, actually, Act 3 is like a normal Act 3 length. I think there's a secret Act 4 that is bizarre, that makes the movie go even longer. But jumping back into it, we get a newscast explanation of the machine, that a passenger pod is basically released from a gantry, and it falls into the center of these large spinning rings, where energy will have accumulated. Some think will act as like an accelerator that like launches the pod off at light speed, and others think it'll open a wormhole. Looking at the camera footage of like the site and the launch, because Ellie is like part of mission control, she notices the preacher she's been seeing protest, and she calls it in. He gets noticed, and they see that he has a bomb, and they scramble to stop him, but they're too late, and he detonates it, and so the whole site explodes. We get like CG footage of the machine like ripping itself apart, which looks. The CG is a little rough, but the idea is really cool because like the rings like spin and tear, and it looks pretty cool.
It's an object ripping itself apart at the speed of sound.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And we find out that Drumlin dies in the explosion, tragically.
Which important narrative difference between the movie and the film, I feel, is that between the movie and the film, what the hell am I saying? We've been podcasting for 3 hours.
5-star runtime, baby. Let's go.
Difference between the abridged version of the book that I read on audiobook and the film is that Drumlin's death in the book is him basically falling on the grenade to save Ellie and everyone else in the room.
Yeah.
It's like a very heroic act, and it is like, I think an important piece of color that we don't get in the film is that like, despite all of their like animosity towards each other, David Drumlin's last act is saving Ellie Arroway's life.
Yeah. Which I think that's really important, and it informs the really big change between Drumlin's character and the fact that like the movie felt the necessity to like have like a more straight antagonist.
Yeah, and I think that's just I just want to bring it up as like I feel like that creates some really big differences between the story being told by both pieces of media.
Yeah, because Ellie's mourning and like remorse makes a lot more sense, and like it feels more impactful in the novel than it does in the movie. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you remember this, but is it a bombing in the? Oh no, it is a bombing.
It is a bomb in the. In both pieces, it's a bomb.
Yeah. So Drumlin dies in the explosion. Ellie returns to the array mourning him and the mission, because it seems like it's kind of completely over because the machine is broken.
Yeah.
But she gets back to her apartment, and there is a TV and computer that were installed while she was gone.
And that's all I had.
She turns it on.
On mirror.
She turns it on, and there are two cosmonauts, and they're like, "Oh, Comrade Arroway," which I love. And they're like, "He's been waiting for you." And they patch her through to S.R. Haddon, who has gotten clearance from the Russian government to live on the space station Mir. And they have some great like composite footage of the actor like floating around.
Yeah.
In zero G. That it's cool. It looks, if you look too closely, it looks a little silly, but in like a really fun and charming way.
Yeah.
And he explains that the low oxygen and gravity environment of the space station is prolonging his battle against cancer. In the book, they go into this like a lot more, and they talk about like how living on a space station in like zero gravity could like extend people's lives like decades.
Well, and then the abridged book just says fucking nothing about it.
You really missed out on all of the juicy science stuff that you would have loved. But Haddon says that he has an excellent view and shows Ellie a second machine that has been secretly built in Hokkaido. And Haddon reveals that he is, because it was built in Japan, it was like built by the subcontractors, and Haddon Industries now owns all of those subcontractors. And so he basically has like finals. He pulls a lot of weight at that site.
We brush past the politics surrounding Okinawa in this scene.
Yes, the novel also acknowledges it in some more detail, and like the Aino people in this region of Japan, and sort of like the social stigma and racism that goes on there, which like it doesn't get into in like really great detail, but it like acknowledges it.
I think just the line of like built by the Japanese, controlled by Americans, is very shades of America's many military bases in Japan, including Okinawa.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot that goes unexplored. But Haddon is basically like, you're gonna be the pilot, Ellie. That's kind of
want an American to go. Once again, I think S.R. Haddon is my favorite character in this movie because he knows how to ham it up.
Yeah,
shout out to John Hurt for that role.
It's such a good performance. And she gets whisked away immediately. On the way, she's being briefed. We find out that the construction team has included a chair and like the harness, despite there not being instructions in the like plans. And they also want her to bring survival equipment and a camera. And she is like, well, it's not in the plans, and so I don't want to. And they're like, we're not doing it unless you do this. Yeah. So like, be quiet.
Also, in this sort of like post-accident or post-bombing, this like grief scene. Mm-hmm. It's somewhere in the sequence. I don't remember if it happens like before or after she talks to Haddon, but there's a moment where she goes back to New Mexico, and she is like standing in the control room of the VLA, and they've just got, whereas like earlier in the film, the scenes that take place in this room, they're like very good about using like discipline accurate technology and this and that. Whereas, like, now she's, like, in this control room, and it's set up like a music studio to the extent that there's like, a Focusrite audio interface on the rack, and we watch her twiddle the knobs on an Eventide Ultra Harmonizer, which, fantastic multi-effects unit. There's also another multi-effects unit in this rack. But she is just, like, changing, an oscillator multiple ratio on this, like, FM reverb patch and the Ultra Harmonized. I think it's really funny how like earlier in the film there was so much effort put into making the technology and the jargon discipline accurate and like scientifically accurate.
Yeah.
And now we're just like in a music studio that's inexplicably set up at the VLA and we're like processing the contact sample through like a reverb algorithm for some fucking reason.
Well, they've made the ultimate radio astronomy discovery, so now it's now they're just producing music over there. But yeah, that's a really good moment. But yeah, the construction team, they include this stuff, and Ellie's upset. But they're basically like, this is a non-negotiable. This is like the minimum like safety requirements for us to like be comfortable doing this.
Yeah.
They channel their inner Snoopy, NASA safety mascot.
That's a very that's also a very like Right Stuff For All Mankind-esque scene.
Yeah.
Where like many such cases where a control systems manager has to be like, no, you do have to use all these safety features that we've built out.
Yeah.
It's non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. And then they also give her a cyanide capsule. And looking into the production of this, they're basically like, this is for like 1,000 reasons that we can think of that you might want this in case like things go wrong. And it's like to minimize your suffering is basically the way that they put it. And it's like the 1,000 ways that it could go wrong and that we can imagine and the ways that we can't imagine. And interestingly, I think they include this. NASA has always denied that they give their astronauts cyanide capsules. But
we do know for a fact they gave the Apollo astronauts cyanide capsules.
Yeah. And it's Sagan, his entire life, like, was like a vehement like repeater of that idea. Like he believed it.
He was a truther about this.
Yes, he like NASA always denied it, but he was like, I know for a fact that you guys do. I know that this is a thing that you do every single time.
So this is like Carl Sagan like having a moment.
Yeah, this is
with the federal government.
He's getting on his like hobby horse for this one.
He loves doing that in the script.
Yeah. But they sort of go over like the plan and like they make a big point out of like bringing up the camera that she's going to use to record the whole trip. Joss arrives on the ship and he tells Ellie that he gave a good reason not to vote for her, that like he can't imagine sending someone who doesn't believe in God. But the real reason he didn't vote for her was that he didn't want to lose her. And so they have like this like reconnection moment. He hands her the compass and tells her to find her way home.
Plot-bearing compass.
And we cut forward in time. We're getting pretty brisk at this point, which I like. We watch Ellie make the walk to her capsule, and she has this cool like coveralls like uniform that apparently the visual like styling they got from Joan of Arc, which is really interesting. And I like that as like that's like an interesting through line of misogyny to me.
Yeah. An interesting thought I had about this scene is like the visual language of it is both, it's very, astronaut walking down the gantry to get into the rocket. It's very like, every movie that's been made about the Apollo program in that way.
Yeah.
I keep referencing that because I feel like this film is very in conversation with
about
the Apollo project. But I also think it's so interesting in that like the chair, I feel like almost takes on this visual language of an execution device, of like, because we've established that this is like a death-defying thing that she's about to do.
Yeah.
And that it's kind of like going up in a rocket, and that like there's like those trappings to it. But I just think the visual language of like, yeah, she's getting strapped down to a chair.
Yeah.
Like the two times that happens is when you're going up in a rocket or you are being executed.
Yeah. Wow. I think there is like a fear that permeates that scene, but I love that characterization of it.
I think it's like really subtle.
Yeah.
I think it's like what there's, I can't think of like a whole lot of, there's like the documentary about Ted Bundy. That's the only media I can think of immediately that like really explores this tension of the execution scene. But
the Green Mile is like another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've not seen the Green Mile.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like that's part of what is cultivating the tension of the scene, is there's just some visual looks that feel very analogous to like a convicted criminal being led to the chair.
Yeah, because she does have like two like engineers like walking her down as well, and like they're in uniforms, and yeah, I can see that.
It feels like a gallows scene for sure.
Yeah, really good catch. I didn't think about that, but that makes so much sense. But yeah, she gets locked into her seat. She puts on a GoPro and they like do the go ahead. She gets closed inside, and we get this really cool shot as like the door sort of like it closes and then it like CGI wise like fuses shut.
Yeah.
In this like really cool way.
I think that's really cool because that's actually you could maybe do that now.
With like super precise
with like
machining.
wire EDM manufacturing.
Yeah.
You can, I mean, like I don't know if you can make a part that big because you have to deal with like thermal expansion and stuff like that. But yeah, like if you've seen like the developments in wire EDM manufacturing where there's like the zero tolerance parts that look like they just become one part.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you could absolutely, with enough like engineering and like heat management of the parts, you could absolutely make a door that just looks like it fuses into the wall because it's so precisely machined.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of that when I was watching it. It's
It'd be so expensive and impractical, but you could do it.
Yeah, there's not really a point to, but it would be cool. She gets closed inside, and then the machine starts spinning up, and as it does, the pod begins like shimmering in like this like almost like ghostly way, and her contact with mission control becomes spotty, and they almost pull the plug, but she's like, I'm good to go, I'm good to go. Like she keeps saying that, and she keeps going. We get the Clark is at the site, like, and he like kind of surprises her by showing up, but he's the one person who can hear through like the radio static that she's saying she's good to go, and so they go through with it. And then they drop her. She launches into a like tunnel, which she is able to view through the like transparent floor of the pod, and it's interesting in the novel. The way they describe this is like it's like the pod is being birthed through like a birthing canal. It is like weird. Like we didn't talk about it, but the novel has like a bunch of stuff about like Ellie wishing she had a kid, which I don't like. But there's a difference between the novel, like a notable difference between the novel and the movie, where like the movie is like very like, it's just like, it's a tunnel. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride, which is really fun. But the novel has a different characterization of it that I just wanted to bring up because I was like, what am I reading? But she drops in, she gets spit out at Vega, and she glimpses like some sort of giant machine, and then she like keeps going. And as she goes, we can see like it's almost like different timelines of her, like peeling off of her. Like different possibilities of lines that she could be saying.
We get into some fun speculation about the nature of relativity.
Yeah, it's really cool. And the effects are really great.
I also think I don't understand how the film would do this better than it did, because it's just a piece of exposition that works better in literature than it does the moving picture. But I really like that the part where she gets like spat out at Vega and gets a glimpse at this megalithic structure. In the book, it's made explicit that is the telescope they use. Like that is their radio transmitter. And I like it because it is a satisfying answer to the question posed earlier, which is why Vega? We've spent years looking at Vega and never seen anything. And whereas I think like the film kind of satisfies itself a little bit in being like, oh, well, they just received our first transmission to them. And so it took 52 years for them to send anything back. But I think it's also a really interesting exposition of, there's a point where Fisher is saying like, oh, well, there's all these other reasons it couldn't be Vega. It's a young system. There's not any habitable planets around it, which is all like, exoplanet research. We know how to look for that kind of stuff. We know how to do mass spectroscopy of planetary systems, and we can tell that Vega doesn't have any habitable planets around it. I think the book really satisfies that with the answer of, well, yeah, no one lives around Vega. That's where the alien radio transmitter is. They just have a megalithic structure in the Vega system, and it looks like it's coming from there because that's where the antenna is.
That's where they have their radio.
I thought that was so satisfying as a part of the book, and I appreciate that the film at least gives a nod to it by showing us the structure. But I feel like you would never know that unless you read the book.
I didn't really pick up on it my first time through, but after reading the book, I was like, okay, that is what it is, and it's really cool. Then she gets spit out at a quadruple star system and sees a city on the planet below, and she's like, they're alive. And then she travels through another tunnel, and she watches the compass sort of like float up. She's been like wearing it as a necklace, and it makes her realize that she's like safe to like get out of the pod, and it's like a 0G environment.
It's like the pod itself is like moving around super violently, but she realizes that with the compass floating, that she can get out of the chair and she will stop shaking violently.
And right after she gets out of it, the chair gets crushed into the ceiling. And going back to your thing about like the like execution, if she stayed in that chair, she would have died. And I think that's like a really interesting point that you brought it up earlier. But as she's floating there, the the pod sort of goes dark and she like pulls out a flashlight. But eventually, so she's like in the dark, and then all at once the pod becomes transparent and she gets to see a celestial event. And then this is the moment, guys. She says,
God.
no words to describe it. Poetry. They should have sent a poet. It's
Roll
so
credits.
beautiful. I had no idea.
That's the end of the podcast.
Woo!
That's the end of the podcast. We're done now.
Yeah, we made it below 3 hours and 30 minutes. Let's see if that's actually true.
Don't look at the runtime.
Yeah, just keep listening. Just keep listening.
Yeah.
Put it on 2 times speed if you need to.
Join our Patreon.
And as she's looking at it, the camera drifts towards Ellie's eye till we look through her pupil and see her floating in the darkness. She awakens standing on a beach, and she reaches up to the sky and like presses against like some sort of like shimmering field around her. I do want to say this moment, it sounds like Super Mario Galaxy noises, which I really liked. I think I wouldn't be surprised if that game like pulled inspiration from this moment.
I also want to say, lingering on the namesake of our podcast just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's really fascinating in the scene how we, the viewer, are not directly... Like, I think we get a glimpse of what she's seeing. We're kind of left to think that it's like a birth of a star or something analogous to that.
Yeah.
But I really like that we, the viewer, are never shown what, like, magisterial, incredible thing she sees. I just think that's like a really good piece of storytelling, in the same way that like horror movies will like never show you the monster, because what your brain creates is so much scarier than any monster the writers could create.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of doing that same thing, where it like the wonder of whatever she's seeing is something that like we could not comprehend, and so we won't.
Yeah, I think that's a really great read.
The film really prompts your imagination there.
Yeah. I think it encourages you to imagine the majesty of space. And I think one of the great things about science fiction of this ilk is that it puts a hand out there for you to take and go on this journey and imagine a different world, imagine like a better world a lot of the time, and one that is like our own and just like so incredibly beautiful. And I think that's kind of why we chose it as the namesake.
Yeah.
It's a perfect moment.
It's a great scene.
Yeah. But also talking about like the camera drifting into Ellie's eye, I saw a production note that like rule of 3 again, this happens 3 times to separate the different acts. And I really like that as a device. But while she's on this beach, it's supposed to be like an interpretation of Pensacola, Florida, where the waves move backwards. The shadows of the trees are constantly like shifting in weird ways.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this, like it's like unbelievably bright, but there's no sun in the sky.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
We're in the cave, as it were.
Yes. Great way of putting it. And a figure walks towards her, constantly morphing and like shimmering until it coalesces into her father. They have like a tender moment, but Ellie quickly realizes that it isn't real and remarks that the aliens must have downloaded her thoughts.
This would piss me off so much if it happened to me.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
If I like, if I were in this position and I was going to an alien world, or even just like if I was like meeting some being that is analogous to a god for me, which I feel like the aliens in Contact are very analogous to a higher power. Obviously, like we understand through dialogue and also through like context that the novel gives that like the vegans don't the vegans have a higher power that they also don't understand.
Yeah.
And the book gets into its stuff about pi in this, which is so cool, and a thing that I am legitimately sad got left out of the film.
It sucks.
But no, like in her having this like higher power moment with the vegans,
You're just fucking with me.
I don't know. I feel like this is a thing that would profoundly piss me off. Is like if I meet a higher power and it comes to me in the form of my dead friend Mac being like, we hope this makes things easier for you, I would be like, get the fuck out. Stop impersonating my best friend.
Yeah, it's so, that specifically, like, I understand narratively why they do that, but like, just like on a literal level, that would be so upsetting. And like the Vegans, they explain that like, oh, we think this is probably like the best way. This is less overwhelming. Like, this is the easiest way to like come to you.
Yeah.
In the way that like an angel comes in a human form rather than their like regular form where they have to be like, be not afraid.
And I want to give the benefit of the doubt that like everyone deals with grief differently, and there's no real right or wrong way.
Yeah.
You know, I think there are some wrong ways to deal with grief, but I think it's hard to say that if there's like, I don't think there is like one correct way to deal with grief.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm willing to be charitable and be like, someone resonated with this on a really positive level. To me, this feels, like, incredibly manipulative and incredibly just, like, icky.
Yeah.
That, like, oh, yeah, we're just going to we're going to be your dead dad for a second.
Yeah. I can understand why, I can understand why this would be comforting to someone. I think this is, like, I think a lot of people have I would like to have one more conversation with my loved one feeling.
Yeah.
But I understand you, like, chafing at this idea so much because it's like
that's not my loved one.
Yeah, that makes it hurt in a way that like they don't acknowledge, but I think that's okay because Ellie has different feelings on it. But like validating what you're saying, like
the character Ellie is very touched by this.
Yeah. And so she knows that it's an alien and she starts asking questions like why they were contacted, and the alien says that humanity contacted them. They were just listening. She asks if there are others. Well, her father scoops up some sand and he says many others before wiping the sand out of his hand. And it just like leaves like a bunch of like granules, like basically like a vision of the night sky, and it's this really, really great visual, just like really subtle of like there are as many grains of sand there are people out in the universe, and it's really awesome. She asks if they built the wormhole transit system, and her father says they don't know who did, but that they've been gone a long time and they may or may not return. She asks if all civilizations come here and if it's a test. No and no. Her father says that humans are an interesting mix. We're capable of beautiful dreams and terrible nightmares. We feel cut off, alone, but we're not. He says that in all their searching, the only thing that makes the emptiness bearable is each other, which I really love.
It's like a really sweet way to think about like the human experience. I think that's very much how I feel about the human experience.
The same. I think it's a great encapsulation of the thing that I tell people a lot is because I try to be a very hopeful person, and I think that's a good way to make it through the really bad times that we all live through, especially now.
There's something really powerful in believing in the goodness of others.
Yeah, and I think you have to acknowledge that there's like badness in the world, but recognizing the beautiful dreams, as he says, is really important. And we always have each other. But then he explains that it's time to go back, and that she's going to be the only one who comes here, and that it's been done this way for billions of years, and that she needs to keep in mind that they need to take small steps. They can't graduate all at once.
He quotes back a thing that her dad said to her at the beginning of the movie when she's learning how to do radio. He says, "Small moves, Ellie. Small moves."
Yeah. That's
only a rule of 2, though.
Which is why it doesn't land as well. Yeah. No, it's good. It's good.
Or wait, no, I'm wrong. Drumlin says it once. I'm pretty sure Drumlin says it once.
I'm trying to think when he would have said it. I believe you.
Someone else in the movie says small moves. I remember. It's
another rule of 3. It would make sense.
Yeah.
I don't think they would let that one drop.
Yeah.
After how many we've gone over. But suddenly she's back on Earth and the pod drops into the water, and the crew radios her and they tell her that they're trying to figure out the malfunction, but that she's safe. And she's like, I left the Earth. And they're like, nothing points to you having left the Earth. Like everything says that there was a malfunction and nothing happened.
Yeah.
her flight camera is like just static, and footage of the test shows that the pod just drops straight through like the energy field that it was creating without any changes.
I love that she's like, what day is it?
Yeah. And I find that really interesting because in the novel, her and the 4 other people that go to Vega, they're actually gone like in their time for a day.
Yeah.
Like longer than a day. But for her, it looks like 20 minutes.
Yeah. No, this is a really big, this is like a really big place where the novel and the film diverge. Like, I thought that was a really interesting component of like, in the novel, they still don't record anything on the instrumentation, but you have 5 people corroborating the story.
Yeah.
And also the fact that they were gone for a full day. Versus one person corroborating the story and she was gone for no time at all.
Yeah.
With an asterisk that we'll get into in the epilogue.
Yeah. And it's like the other thing about the novel version is that there's sand on the bottom of their pod, which is like it's like a point that it did happen. But I think both the novel and the movie kind of try and leave it ambiguous, but it feels...
The novel makes it a lot more clear that the government knows what's up.
Yes, the novel gets into that. I think Sagan and the writers in both versions kind of like try and leave room for there to be like some ambiguity, but I think it's really hard not to read it like the text as it is explicitly as like it did happen in both versions.
Yeah. Well, and the film also, I feel like it's really setting up its own epilogue.
Yes, definitely. You got to cut me floundering here. The president calls for an inquiry, basically, and into like what happened.
Yeah.
And Kitts resigns and then heads the committee. While people accuse him of like going to run for office off of this. We jump to the inquiry, and Ellie explains that the machine opened a wormhole, and Kit asks why the aliens would bring her all across the galaxy to send her home with no proof, and he begins accusing her of having a psychotic episode before then accusing her of faking the signal with the help of Haddon.
They really have a whole, like, bitches be crazy scene here.
Yeah.
It's intense.
It is. They're like, he basically launches into this tirade where he's like, you were having a psychotic episode. Like, this is something that you either made up or this was like a premeditated, you worked with Haddon because you were getting your funding cut or like you were losing access to these telescopes and you wanted more. And he wanted to like leave behind this legacy. What better way to do all of this and like be a really big contributor to the machine? And just like all of these different accusations. And like, it's basically like Haddon would be getting like proverbial immortality or like getting to explore new technologies, like all of this stuff. And while he's like going on this tirade, we see Haddon being zipped into a body bag aboard Mir.
Like as Kitts is like reading him the riot act over TV, like he is being stuffed into a body bag by the 2 cosmonaut friends we've seen previously.
Yeah. And I think the really interesting thing is that in the novel, he's much younger in the novel. He's only 50 and he doesn't die at the end of the book. He like puts himself into cryogenic stasis and then gets launched out of the solar system to like be frozen and then awoken by aliens.
That's
and
such a more mad scientist thing to do.
Yeah, it's like there's like this long section where it's like in 10 million years his I don't know if it's 10 million, but in like so many years his frozen body will be discovered and they'll be able to like take him out and like cure any maladies and give him the immortality that he craves.
And they get to have some fun flavors in there about Walter Disney.
Yeah, it does feel very that. Finally, Kitts brings up Occam's razor and applies it to the situation. Basically, like, is it more likely that this was faked? Like, that there are aliens and they reached out to you and this machine that, like, very clearly did nothing actually sent you to Vega? Or is it more likely that you and Haddon faked the signal to, like, do all of this research stuff?
Yeah.
And then a senator interjects.
Actually, this is it's not just a senator. This is a guy. This guy is a part of the CNN cameos. It's Barnard Shaw. He was like a CNN anchor a little bit before our time. He had a really big influence on. I was looking him up last night because of his presence in this scene.
Interesting.
Apparently, he had a really huge influence on the 1998 presidential debates between Dukakis and H.W. Bush.
Oh.
And he asked Dukakis, basically, he asked Michael Dukakis, like, would you change your position on the death penalty if your wife got raped and murdered? A crazy question to open the debate with. But that question apparently, like, caught Dukakis off guard, and as a, like, knock-on effect of that, he ended up losing the election. And a lot of people think that it's because, like, they watched him get caught so off guard by that question on live TV.
That's a crazy
and
fucking
so yeah,
question to ask.
the guy we're talking about who's about to like really wrap up the rule of threes quotes in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Had like a real impact on the 1988 elections, and was he died a couple of years ago, but he was a longtime news anchor for CNN, but like before our time, so we wouldn't know who he is unless we looked him up like I did.
Damn, that good to know. But I'm going to read his little monologue.
Yeah.
He says, Dr. Arroway, you come to us with no evidence, no record, no artifacts. Only a story that, to put it mildly, strains credibility. Over $500 billion were spent. Dozens of lives were lost. Are you really going to sit there and tell us that we should just take all this on faith?
He raises his eyebrows and goes, on faith?
Yeah, and this is the other big mic drop moment for this movie.
Yeah.
That is, like, it's, like, laughable. I get what they're going for, but it just, like, it doesn't land. It's so silly and over the top.
It's a real God's Not Dead moment.
It is. That's the best way of putting it. It's very Christian movie. It's like, yeah. And then Ellie admits that it may not have happened, that she has no proof that she could have hallucinated it, and that she would react the same way to someone else, like sharing the story, but that she can't say it didn't happen because she experienced it, and every fiber of her being tells her it was real. I also want to read her response because I think it's really compelling.
Yeah.
I had an experience. I can't prove it. I can't even explain it. But everything I know as a human being, everything that I am tells me that it was real. I was given something wonderful, something that changed me forever. A vision of the universe that tells us undeniably how tiny and insignificant and how rare and precious we all are. A vision that tells us that we belong to something that is greater than ourselves, that we are not, that none of us are alone. I wish I could share that. I wish that everyone, if even for one moment, could feel that awe and humility and hope. But that continues to be my wish. Which I think is just like a great encapsulation of, I think it captures the phenomenon of like astronauts and people who go to space looking down at the planet and like having this like swelling moment of like, it's kind of like ego death is like the best way that I can describe it. Like astronauts go through ego death when they look at the Earth. Yeah. And I would love to experience that.
Notably, William Shatner, Captain James T. Kirk himself, like, had an existential crisis going to space.
But it's like it's always like a good existential crisis. Is like the way that people describe
his was bad.
Oh, was it? I thought he was like it was like really overwhelming, but he came out like feeling good about it.
The quote I remember is that he said, "I looked off into the blackness and all I saw was death."
But isn't the other half of it that like he looked at Earth and that he was like that's home?
Like maybe.
And he felt better about it, but like, looking into the blackness and all I saw was death is crazy.
Captain Kirk, everybody.
Woof. That guy's also really old. So
yeah.
I would have feelings about that if I was as old as he is. But yeah, just a beautiful monologue that Jodie Foster delivers so well. Maybe we can cut her in speaking that to do it justice. But that they sort of close the inquiry with that, and Ellie leaves and then connects with Joss after in the lobby, and they hug, and then we get a gratuitous shot of them walking down the stairs of the Capitol building in front of the Washington Monument.
Yeah. And there's like a crowd out in the mall.
Yeah, and that moment, that shot is so God's Not Dead.
Absolutely.
Especially the later movies where they go to the Supreme Court and shit. Like that is such a like walking down the steps in front of the Washington Monument is so cheesy.
And you know, charitably, God's Not Dead comes like 15 years after this film.
Yeah.
So like they're biting contact, not the other way around, but still.
Vibe-wise, it's the best way that I can describe it.
It's hard to watch that movie now without thinking about like the mid-2000s, like weird, like Christian apologetics films.
Yeah, definitely. And then as they climb into a car to drive away, Joss said, like a journalist asks him a question, and he says that despite being bound by a different covenant than Ellie, they share the pursuit of truth and that he believes her. And he says that even when like she couldn't believe him about his faith, which I find really interesting. And we get a shot of them holding hands as they drive away. It's sort of like I kind of like this moment where it's like they both have this moment of faith now and they can better understand each other. And it's different types of faith and it's different types of belief, but they've come to a mutual understanding, which I think I like. And I like that this movie is kind of optimistic about like a union of faith and science. That we are sorely missing these days.
I think that's like the thing that I really got out of that scene is like Palmer Joss stands by her side because he watched her have a religious experience, something he didn't think she could have.
Yeah.
He watched her have her, not her faith in evidence, but like she watched her have her like worldview shaken by this experience. And he's like, well, something must have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
This is not the Ellie Arroway I know.
Yeah. It's really effective. And I think it's a good bookend. We get a scene that feels like a MCU post-credits scene where Kitz is speaking to Constantine, the White House staffer, and they discuss, Kitz is like, oh, are we going to like give her a medal? And Constantine is like, at least a really good grant. And then she mentions a findings report and she points out that the camera recorded 18 hours of static. And she's like, I find that really interesting, Kitz. And it's kind of the implication is that he wiped it. And that it's like further proof that Ellie did go on this trip and did experience everything. Yeah. Crazy that it was 18 hours. If true, that's wild. Yeah. And then we end on Ellie giving a tour of the Very Large Array in New Mexico to some school kids. And we get the final remark that if space is empty, it seems like an awful waste. And later at the Grand Canyon, she scoops up some soil and contemplates all the hundreds of grains in her palm. And it's like a direct mirror of the shot of her father scooping it up when she's out in space. And that's the end.
And I do just want to touch on for a moment the way in which the book kind of does a different ending. Just because I think the concept it explores is so cool. Yeah. So one of the things that the aliens tell Dr. Arroway in the book is that, like, one of their, like, she asked them, like, what's a piece of evidence for you that just feels, like, so unshakable as, like what gives you basically a religious experience? Yeah. And they were, like, deep down in the numbers of pi, there is very clearly some element of intelligent design. Mm-hmm. And so the very end of the book, after they've gone through the inquiry, after they've shown that there's no evidence that Dr. Arroway went anywhere, after they've kind of like wrapped up this epilogue in this inquiry segment, we see Dr. Arroway looking deep down, like 10 to the 14 digits down in the numbers in the decimals of pi. Yeah. And we see her discover that in base 11, at 10 to the 14 digits of pi down, mm-hmm. you get a string of ones and zeros, and she zooms the like view of the text editor on her computer out, and she sees that the ones form a perfect circle, which I feel like that's such a cool concept that, like, you can find God in transcendental numbers. I think that's so fascinating. I would be in the cult of Pythagoras if I were contemporaneous to it. That shit would have got me hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. And just otherwise, like, I think it's so... I understand why it's, like, a moment that, like, the screenwriters probably thought was just, like, too much to throw at a movie audience. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably... It feels to me like it was probably like, we can't throw math at a movie audience. Yeah. which sucks because it's such a fascinating moment. It's such a compelling piece of speculative sci-fi. And I feel like there could have been this really cool shot of Ellie sitting at like her beige late 90s PC and like zooming out on the screen and seeing a like an ASCII circle in the numbers of pi. I feel like that could have been really interesting. Alas, the film does not do it.
Yeah.
And I think the note the film ends on is still really interesting.
Yeah. I think there is a version that does that same does the pi digits thing, and that would be really cool. But I do think that cutting it makes sense for the version of the movie that we got, and I think they replace it that I think functionally, narratively fills the same hole, but isn't as like unique and interesting as what Sagan writes in the novel. And I do kind of mourn that with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything else that you want to talk about?
We've said so much.
We have said so much.
You can see that I at some point while we were talking, I moved the counter on the DAW from time to bars because I didn't want us to see it when it went over 3.5 hours.
I know that it has, though.
Boy, has it. Not very much.
Yeah.
I thought that this was a fantastic movie. I also think the book is like really interesting. I think the book, I read the book and I also read some like reviews of the book, and I do think like less so in the film, but I definitely think in the book there is some like narrative misogyny to be discussed. I think especially like Ellie having like all of these like seemingly irrelevant love interests. I at least appreciate that in the film that's kind of condensed into the character of Joss instead of Ellie just kind of like sleeping around with all of these scientists that she's colleagues with.
Yeah.
All that's to say, I think the film does an interesting job with the source material. I think it's like Herculean of a piece of media to make a film about.
Yeah.
And I think they did a fantastic job with just this insane scope.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think I love the way in which the movie is like aggressively rooted in the contemporary reality of 1997.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. I think it does like, as much as it removes some of the headier subject matter, I think it's really interesting as a piece of media in how it engages with like contemporary science.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a testament to like harder science fiction that I think the harder science fiction is rare, especially in movies and films.
Yeah, you mostly see hard sci-fi in books.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those great examples. I was reading about like the response at the time, and Roger Ebert gave it a really favorable review. He gave it like a 3.5 out of 4 stars, which is, from that guy, I think that's high praise.
Yeah, that's good for Ebert.
Yeah, and he obviously it's a very high score, and like I think I agree with it. On the first watch, I was like less hot on it, but now like after a second watch, like I appreciate like there's a lot of craft that goes into the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think it reaches like the creative highs of Arrival, which I think is like one of my favorite movies of all time. But I think it is so competent, and it's a great blend between like hard sci-fi and like a 90s blockbuster.
Yeah.
That is really compelling and unique, and I think a valuable touchstone from a very specific cultural moment, and I love it. Yeah,
I really love that it's this kind of, it like exists as almost this tableau of 20th century science.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even the there's an interesting line in the novel where the Ellie's trip happens on the last day of 1900 and anything.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of obvious why Y2K didn't make its way into this film.
Mm-hmm.
Because 1997 people were probably already scared about Y2K.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's like a really interesting tableau about like political end of history, the science politics around post-World War II and around the Cold War and around post-Cold War, how it ties in these like contemporaneous elements, like alluding about the superconducting super collider, and like the space program. I think I think the film is like a really interesting piece of like fiction, as well as just a really interesting piece of science communication.
Yeah. And I think speaking to it as like a premillennial movie, I think it's something that we're going to talk about inevitably as we watch movies from different eras, this being a pre-9/11 movie. And I think I don't have a timeline of all of the movies that we'd like to talk about in this podcast, but I think this is probably one of the last like really great ones before 9/11.
Yeah.
And that moment, like so many things in the world,
and in being like just before 9/11.
Yeah, just like a few years beforehand, the way that 9/11, like we all know that it changed everything in so many different ways, but like the way that like that heightened like the imperial tension of the United States and brought it to the forefront of American minds, it changes so much science fiction, especially first contact fiction after this point, because the tensions of like the imperial core become so much more explicit to a lot of people. And I think they were always there. They've always been there. But I think after 9/11 is when people started to feel it, if not like be fully aware of it. They felt it in their soul. And so that really just like changes, like Arrival, for example, is like steeped in that moment.
Oh, absolutely. I was about to say, I think Arrival will be like a really interesting contrast as like a post 9/11 film that's dealing with this subject matter.
Yeah, it's gonna be really fruitful to talk about. But I think that's everything that I have to say about this movie. I think we really milked it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty high on this movie, and I'm pretty high on the discussion that we had. I think we got a lot out of it.
Pod, and dare I say, cast.
Amen. That is going to do it for this episode, folks. Please rate, review, and share the podcast so we can continue talking about the science fiction that fills our hearts and minds. If you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share, send us an email at submissions@poets_pod.com, and we may respond to them in a Q&A episode. Do you have anything you want to share before we go?
Follow our social medias, sign up for our mailing list, sign up for our Patreon. When the first episode comes out, the Patreon will still be a couple of weeks off, but we'll have a Patreon eventually. Be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
And thank you everybody for sitting and listening to me, Natalie, and my wonderful friend Natalie to talk about this film for an hour longer than the runtime of the film.
Yes. We'll be back soon to discuss Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Again,
so excited for Close Encounters.
Same. Thank you again for choosing to spend some time with us. And until next time, be good and watch movies.
See y'all.